begin again, and we are going to start with item 4.3, the update on the student-centered funding formula.
So as the group comes up to begin the presentation, I just want to take a moment again to thank Jim Austin for taking on the role of supporting the Chancellor's office again in the implementation of student-centered funding formula. I can say with complete accuracy that I have heard quite a lot of input from the field about the student-centered funding formula. And 99% of it is well-meaning and good input. This is, we are in the first year of implementation. We have a priority of ensuring that our colleges be funded to 100% of the level that they deserve to be funded, and that will continue to be an underlying issue in the student-centered funding formula, but certainly as we roll forward, working with the Department of Finance, with the governor, and supporting our colleges, we will continue to work through some of the challenges that have arisen in the implementation. And with that, I will turn it over to Vice Chancellor Laura Mattoon.
While our PowerPoint is coming up, we'll just take a second to introduce ourselves. I'm Laura Mattoon, Vice Chancellor of External Affairs.
Frances Parmalee, Assistant Vice Chancellor of College Finance and Facilities Planning Division.
I think you've heard enough about me. I'm Jim Austin.
We just wanted to start by providing a few framing comments about the student-centered funding formula. You may recall that the problem this funding formula was aiming to solve was a problem of too few students achieving their goals. More than half of students ultimately were not making it to their educational goals, and the community colleges face serious and persistent equity gaps, both in terms of regions of the state as well as in terms of race and ethnicity. The language you have here before you is actually the intent language included in the legislation that created the student-centered funding formula. It focuses explicitly on encouraging access for traditionally underrepresented students, providing additional funding in recognition of the needs to provide support for low-income students, rewarding colleges as they achieve progress towards completing their student success goals, and improving overall equity. The student-centered funding formula also focused on ensuring predictability for our community colleges. Just briefly, historically, community colleges were funded based primarily on the number of full-time equivalent students enrolled at the census date. The student-centered funding formula changed that framework to maintain 70% of dollars focused on that base allocation, that traditional FTES credit allocation. But it also began to look at two new measures: supplemental access, the number of low-income students who are receiving a Board of Governors fee waiver, currently known as the California College Promise Grant, students who are AB 540 recipients, and students who are receiving Pell Grants. 20% of the formula is based in that supplemental access allocation, and then 10% of the formula is based in student completions with additional values, point values, which equate to dollar amounts for low-income students achieving their educational goals. The student-centered funding formula was designed to explicitly respond to evidence and research from the other states that had looked at changing their own funding formulas. It aligns to the goals of the Vision for Success, and it puts in place fiscal incentives that supports the implementation of guided pathways. We're maximizing access to financial aid for our students. We're incentivizing achievement of milestones like transfer level math and English, and we're rewarding completion of students both in terms of career education programming as well as in terms of transfer.
In 2018-19, as Chancellor Oakley mentioned, it was our first year of implementation, and it included a number of challenges for our system. The most significant issue that we faced was funding was insufficient to fully implement the new student-centered funding formula, realizing a shortage of $103 million. Impacts of the revenue shortfall was felt most acutely by those districts that would have seen the most significant year-to-year gains in transitioning to the new formula. To manage this reality, we consulted with the legislature and the Department of Finance and collectively agreed that the top priority to ensure the minimum revenues commitment was met. At minimum, all districts would continue to receive their 17-18 revenues adjusted by COLA of 2.71. In doing that, it was necessary to moderate the funding increase for some district and constrain revenue increase to no more than 8.13 above the 17-18 revenues. Next month, we will be making the final apportionment for 18-19. A webinar will be held on December 2nd to provide additional clarity and to provide an opportunity for the field to ask questions. The 2019 Budget Act amends the student-centered funding formula structure to create long-term stability and clarify the outcomes we want to encourage. Specifically, the budget adjusts some of the metrics in the student success allocation to avoid counting a student multiple times, and therefore will most closely align with the incentives in the funding formula with guided pathways. The formula counts only the highest award, counts an award only if a student is enrolled in the district in the year the award was granted, adjusts the transfer definition, and moves to using a 3-year average for success factors to create greater year-to-year stability and moderate the effects of large increases or decreases in a single year. It also extends the minimum guarantee provision by 1 year, providing an extra year for districts to transition to the formula. The transition period now is till 2021-22. And lastly, it requires our Chancellor's Office to establish rates in 1920 for all 3 buckets of funding. In 2019-20, 70% of the funding will be allocated for the base allocation, 20% for the supplemental allocation, and 10% for the student success allocation. Then in future years, it will simply grow by COLA. As we continue on with our implementation, we have a number of items that we would want to focus our efforts on. As you've seen in the 2019 Budget Act, budget and legislative requests, there was a clear statement that we are advocating for full funding for the student-centered funding formula. This will provide us the ability to reduce the uncertainties districts face in building budgets. And if legislation allows for mid-year adjustments based on our better estimates, this will avoid the disruption of programs, of education programs, and also create stability in regards to a district's fiscal health.
Our other area of focus is on ensuring that the districts that are currently in that minimum revenue funding place understand and have professional development to support the types of practices that will not only impact best outcomes for students, but also help them see increased revenues under the funding formula. We've been talking a lot about improving practices around financial aid receipt, ensuring colleges are accurately reflecting the true cost of attendance in their regions, and then helping them match Promise Grant and Pell Grant with those students who are eligible for financial aid. We're also working strategically with the Guided Pathways coordinators with our AB 705 implementation strategies to make sure that colleges know what to do in order to improve student outcomes and to align with the goals of the funding formula.
We wanted to also improve the data management that is being performed out there in the field. FICMAC conducted a data review early this summer, which focused on data policies, procedures, responsibilities, and the flow for the data elements used in the funding formula. The funding formula did change how funding was determined, and now data is relied on more importantly as that ties to their to their funding levels. The funding formula primarily relies on data submitted to our Chancellor's Office Management and Information Systems, our MIS system. Some of the findings I want to highlight is that the districts are working to implement changes to improve student outcomes and improve data quality as it results in the funding formula. Some of the challenges that our districts face is that not many of them have formal structures or defined roles of data governance and MIS submissions. However, staff are working hard to improve their data submissions and correct errors. However, staff workload has increased and many experienced staff are near retirement. Districts have identified a need for us to provide training and resources on the MIS submission process. The pace of changes in recent years have made it difficult for districts to implement combined improved processes. So as we move forward into 2019 and this upcoming year, we want to improve our communications at the Chancellor's office and the districts to provide them the ability to have sufficient time and to implement all the necessary changes to improve our data quality.
The last item listed here is to monitor the recommendations of the Oversight Committee. In establishing the student-centered funding formula, the legislature appointed an independent Oversight Committee tasked with reviewing specific aspects of the funding formula for additional changes moving forward. We are excited to introduce the co-chairs of the Funding Formula Oversight Committee, Kindred Murillo, who is the president of Southwestern College, and Valerie Johnson, who is our student representative. Joining them on this next panel will also be the League CEO Board President, Joe Wise of Shasta College. With that, we're going to turn it over to the panel, and then we're happy to come back and answer additional questions that you may have after that.
Welcome. Thanks for making the trip from different ends of the state.
Okay, good afternoon. We're going to talk through real quickly the Oversight Committee's current recommendations. We have a virtual meeting coming up, and we have an in-person meeting in December at San Diego City College. We hope that some of you will come and join us because it'll be an all-day meeting where we'll finalize our white paper that is due to the legislature and the Department of Finance in January. With that, Valerie's going to take the first recommendation that the Oversight Committee has come up with and move forward.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Valerie Johnson. I serve as the vice chair of the Student-Centered Funding Formula Oversight Committee. And our first recommendation is around first-generation college students. One of the areas where the legislature asked for recommendations from the committee was to whether or not to include the first-generation students in the funding formula in the supplemental allocation. So after consideration, the Oversight Committee has come to a recommendation that including first-generation college students in the funding formula as an unduplicated count with low-income students is what has been recommended. So that would mean that counting first-generation students as a metric, but if those first-generation students are also low-income students, not to duplicate that count. And then additionally, the Oversight Committee has recommended that we should define first-generation students as students for whom neither parents have received a bachelor's degree. And that was the committee's recommendation on that front. So about our implementation plan, this is what we're going to be considering moving forward. Now that we have come to these recommendations, we have to look at how we're going to recommend that those be implemented. So our timeline for the implementation of recommendations and the funding formula by no later than 22-23 fiscal year. So that's the timeline that we're working with. And we also need to decide whether to recommend, we have decided to recommend that they not be duplicated for first generation and low income. And then there was whether or not we would consider recommending the same or different number of points for first gen and low income, and we've decided to not do that. And then first gen status in the success allocation, we've decided to recommend that that be included.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about whether to adjust the definition of low income to account for cost of living. This has taken up a lot of conversation with our committee in the last few meetings. The recommendation at this point in time is the Oversight Committee recommends further study of the supplemental allocation before any additional changes are made. And the Oversight Committee recommends that the hold harmless provision be extended to 2023. And I want to take a minute and explain that. So one of the things that we are really concerned about in going through this is the complexity of the cost of living issue. I think is Oversight Committee members, we've really looked at a lot of simulations, a lot of data, a lot of really good input has been put into this. And when you start really taking apart student economic insecurity, it's not that simple. And so it's an area that we're very concerned about. The other area is, as we do these simulations, the funding swings that would happen between different districts, in particular the coastal communities and the Central Valley. So those become pretty real. And one of the concerns, and I think we talked about it earlier, is stability is a big part of equity and making sure that colleges are funded to be able to serve their students. And those funding swings concern us greatly. When you add on top of it that it's more complex than that. The other thing, the question, and we haven't had a chance to talk about this in great detail, but we're getting a lot of feedback around this. Should the financial aid funding be adjusted to address the high cost of living? And rather, in other words, sending to the students rather than the colleges. And so that question has come, I know I'm getting phone calls over this quite a bit, around should the money go to the college in high cost of areas or should it go to the student? And so it's a good discussion to have because it really makes you dig down into the data about what student economic insecurity really is. And so I think that's been part of our discussion overall. I'm not going to read through all of these for you, but at least gives you an idea of what our, why our recommendation is not to really do much of anything on this right now until we can ferret through some of these questions. And we want to understand about how college districts are using funding from the supplemental allocation to support students, which students are benefiting from the services provided with funding from the supplemental allocation, and have college districts increase, decrease, maintain services to low-income students based on the amount of supplemental funding they receive. And so we're working try to answer those questions.
And our next point of consideration that the Oversight Committee has been asked to provide recommendations on is whether or not to include incoming academic proficiency level of students in consideration in the supplemental allocation of the formula. So as far as our recommendations and considerations as a committee, we've considered students' incoming academic proficiency as a really important issue, but not one that should be included in the supplemental allocation at this time. This was something that the committee overwhelmingly agreed with. It was something that we feel that there was definitely not enough data to support the inclusion of something like this because we really don't know how that affects students. So the Oversight Committee recommends that the issue of incoming academic proficiency be reconsidered when there's consistent and reliable data about it, and then we can move forward possibly with maybe a trigger mechanism that once this data may be available, we would be happy to go and reconsider, but we do not feel comfortable moving forward with the lack of data.
So we'll just transition right to me, I think, and I'll just mention that I'm grateful to be here and be able to share with you all. I serve in my first job as Superintendent President of Shasta College, and then I have this second job of being the CEO, Board President this year for the League. And so I'm kind of presenting with both those hats on. First of all, I just wanted to make the overall point that might be obvious, but it's been challenging to predict our funding levels. And I'm kind of presenting from a Shasta College perspective here at first, but I think we've been pretty successful so far at Shasta College in managing this. Part of it's, I guess I'll say, the ironic luxury of serving a very low-income part of the state up in far northern California. Sometimes I've heard people describe it as the Appalachia of California. And so we have many low-income students, and so we've been doing a lot of work to serve them. But we've also made some changes in our student approach to student support in the last 4 years or so, and under any formula, I think it would have been helpful for our students and their success. So first, just some context under the 70%. Shasta College was in the struggling to maintain enrollment category. What really helped us stave off enrollment declines being significant in the last 5 to 7 years since the Great Recession has been our emphasis on expanding dual enrollment through local high school partnerships. And just to give you a little perspective there, about 250 FTS of our 7,000 to 7,200 FTS are now dual enrollment high school students, and that's about 3.6% of our enrollment. And so we would have probably declined by 3.6% if we hadn't expanded into that program. And then, of course, I would be remiss not to mention all the different natural disasters. And in that, I include PG&E shutoffs of power as a natural disaster. My first 12 years at Shasta College, I only had to shut down the campus 0 times. And in the last 15 months, because of fires and PG&E and snowstorms, it's been 5 times. Wow. So it's been a challenging 15 months. And then just to give you another picture under the supplemental metrics, the equity metrics, however you want to refer to them, I think we've been fortunate in being a little bit ahead of the curve comparing to some districts in our financial aid improvements. I see this as for those districts who are a little maybe behind when that $15 million of one-time money came last year or the year before, whenever that was. If they hadn't started trying to automate their financial aid processes, I think they could be doing some catch-up over the next couple of years. But you can see our increase in both Pell Grant and California Promise Grant students over the past 4 years has been significant. Our head count is around 12 to 13,000 a year. So that gives you an idea of the level of need in our area. But also the, take into account that we have not grown as a district. In fact, we probably have shrunk in our traditional Pell Grant, Promise Grant student pool because of the dual enrollment that I explained in the last slide. And then the next slide just gives you a little piece of how we've been doing under the one piece of the metrics for success. We really have tried through some of the grant opportunities and categorical opportunities over the past few years that you're familiar with to improve our student services and do a lot more with helping students complete. And so you can see it kind of goes up and down now the last couple of years, but we've got a 21% plus increase in certificates and degrees we're awarding per year, and those are unduplicated and only Chancellor's Office approved certificates and degrees, not the low unit certificates. So you can see great improvement there as a college. And maybe one way to think of that is we're about 0.6% of the state at Shasta College when you look at the total enrollments in all the districts. So looking at how I view some of the benefits, you've heard some of these already, so I won't belabor the points, but aligning with the vision for success. And I did want to note that the hold harmless provision has provided time for districts to adjust, although maybe it may not be enough time. I tend to think in about 5-year increments of trying to make change in a college and to try to actually see changes take hold. And so it is kind of a rush to make significant changes in how we operate. But I do think it's a big plus that we're moving away from an enrollment only or growth in enrollment model. And then just some of the challenges as I think back on it. Of course, these might be repetitive for you, but a lack of advanced modeling. As I look at it, it was a huge shift in resources. 30% of the shift is over $2 billion of our about $7.4 billion in funding as a system. So that much money being changed differently year over year is a pretty big change. And so I think that's what we're seeing some of the disagreement around the state over the new formula. I'll put on my complaining hat and say we don't really know our funding levels yet for last year, where they ended up, let alone this year with the changes to the formula. And so trying to plan and lead a college district in that situation is difficult. And then I'm seeing a lot of I'll just put it this way, division in the state when it comes to leading our districts. Many districts were told they were going to get more money and then were constrained. Many districts are looking out 3 years and are in hold harmless and are thinking, how are we going to take a 5, 10, 15% cut if we can improve enough in the funding formula? And so it's been a very challenging time. I don't think I've seen this much division in the leadership for quite a while in the state. And then my last little point there is just that when you don't know for sure, and not even for sure, but with some certainty what your funding levels are going to be, it makes it very difficult to handle your long-term decisions in labor negotiations. And then this is my last slide and one I struggled with the most, I will admit up front. But trying to think of what I'm trying to advocate for statewide is to try to come together and figure out a way forward. Some things that we're talking about are perhaps making a little better stable base. I'd like to get away from the hold harmless language, but looking at modeling out current year plus COLA being a floor for districts, so there's a little less fear of the coming years, or the out years. I'd advocate for stopping the rebenching and significant changes to the formula, little tweaks maybe, but we never even really fully got to know what our funding was last year, and it's changed for this year, and we still don't know this year, et cetera, et cetera. So that makes it challenging to plan. This third bullet is one I struggled with the most, so I'll come back to it. And then the fourth is the idea of supporting additional resources for the Chancellor's Office. I think you heard that in the beginning from the Chancellor's Office staff. They want to provide more support, more training, more modeling, and I'm a big advocate of getting extra dollars for the Chancellor's Office to be able to do that. So back to that third bullet point, I guess the discussion is going around, is there a way to make some of the performance metrics additive in the future rather than stuck in the full formula? I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I think there's 2 points that I would say are important. One is not to lose the focus in equity that we're really trying to do and closing those equity gaps with the formula. And then secondly, trying to find a way not to have a large cut in funding or harm to districts statewide in the out years. And I do think there has to be a way to provide, just like under the old formula, there was districts that were growing and districts that were shrinking over time, but it just wasn't a sudden year-over-year change. And so I think we need to find a way to smooth out those potential shrinkages and growth in year-over-year changes.
Thank you.
Kindred, before you depart, because I'm sure some of the members may have a question about the Oversight Committee, can you remind the members of the Board of Governors how you all were appointed and what's all in the scope of your oversight?
Okay, thank you. So we were appointed by 3 different entities, and I may mess up on one of them. I know that the governor appointed 4, I believe the Assembly appointed 4, and the Senate appointed 4. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
She's right.
Okay, good. And we were given a charge to look at with 2 priorities, and we just went over priority number 1, which was basically the first generation, our academic proficiency, and cost of living components. In the second priority, we were given ISAs, instructional service agreements. Sorry, I shouldn't have acronymed you. And that was one of the areas we were supposed to look at, and non-credit. The other component of the second priority was what we would do in the case of a decline in revenues, which I think probably should have been our first priority now that we've been through that. So, and then the implementation plans for all of the priorities. I will say one of the things, and Chancellor Oakley said it earlier, and we're all saying it, is we are chronically underfunded as a community college system, and we as a committee recognize that. We also recognize that we have been charged with very clear priorities.
Well, one final question I think would be helpful as a board leads into this is, as an oversight committee, for example, on the issue of cost of living for high-cost areas, you receive testimony input from people throughout the system. Is that correct?
Yes, that is now my other new full-time job. I'm sorry, you have to have a sense of humor when you're a college president, a superintendent president, and you're working with a board, and you're being, there's a lot of advocacy around this. There's been a lot of really well-done white papers. We get input from different CEOs and faculty and staff. So, yes, we have, in fact, what we've done is we've gone to a couple of extra meetings. We were just going to do in-person meetings, and we were having an extra couple of virtual meetings. And in fact, our last meeting was 3 hours, and of that 3-hour meeting, 1 hour was taking in comments. You want to add anything?
Yeah, if I could add to that, we also field comments and feedback from students, who is my main constituency and who are going to be the ones most affected by the implementations in this formula. So, yes.
Yes.
Maybe we should let Vice Chancellor Mattoon come back up, finish, and then I don't think, Kendra, are you going anywhere right now?
No, we'll
Okay,
be here
so
for
we'll
a few
floor
minutes.
back up as questions align.
Do you have any time constraints? I heard that there might be a time constraint.
We're okay for now.
Okay.
We're happy to take questions, well, and I'm sure there are members of the public here that would also like to speak. So whichever way you'd like to approach that.
Member Parago.
Thank you. I have a few questions, actually. The first question I have is on this idea that it needs to be in your areas of continued focus, and you talked about that we need to fully fund the student-centered funding formula. But fully fund, I guess I'm asking, seems like a relative term because there's still going to be a finite bundle of money, right? Do we know what fully funding means? Because as people start to maximize their output in these areas, there would have to be a point where we still hit another ceiling somewhere. Or do we know if everybody maximized everything what that would look like, and that's what fully funded means?
Well, I would just say in our budget request, we asked for $328 million in Prop 98 resources for the funding formula, which included a cost of living adjustment, a 1% increase in the funding formula, and an increase for financial aid administration. But I think your point is exactly right. We are guaranteed our 11% of Proposition 98, and the conversation that we would like to have with the legislature and the administration is about whether or not that 11% of Proposition 98 is sufficient to fully fund community colleges and all the work that they need to do. The way we've approached it in this year's budget request is by trying to increase revenues for things that are funded outside of Prop 98. STRS and PERS contributions is one area, financial aid is another area. So to the degree that we can fund core operations or student services, student resources outside of Prop 98, we believe that will free up money within Prop 98 to do all of the work that colleges have been tasked with doing. And I think my colleague has some additions.
That's a deceptively complex question. What is fully
as
funding?
my teacher, you should be able to navigate it, right?
Wait a minute, that took a nasty turn. The reason I say that, and I am going to go more directly to your question, but I had the unique opportunity to be the vice chancellor in the highest funded district in the world, probably, on a per student basis, and also the vice chancellor in the lowest funded district in the system under the old formula on per dollar basis. And you know, the issues were all the same, by the way. So defining what fully funded really means is something I think we do need to address as a system. I think in terms of fully funding the implementation of the intent of this formula, student-centered funding formula. That's one level, but and I'm sure you all agree. The second level is what really should be the funding level of the system. We all know we're funded dramatically less than the other segments of higher education, and how does anybody defend that? And that, although maybe it's not directly related to the $106 million we need for this formula, it is related to it. And I think you as a board and we as a system need to be addressing that. What does it really take to fully fund this system to serve the students that we should be serving? So I think it's typical for you. It's a deceptively complex question.
With a very clear and concise answer, as usual, so thank you.
Can I add one last thing, Member Pergo, which I think is important for those everyone watching to also take in? As Jim mentioned, in the previous formula, fully funding the formula meant providing all the resources necessary so that every district that was growing in enrollment would have full funding for that enrollment. That was rarely the case. I don't know, Jim, if you knew of a year where actually every district was funded 100% of its enrollment growth.
No, never.
So we are carrying over the same problem from the last formula to this formula, which is if our colleges do everything that we ask them to do, we're still not giving them the resources that they deserve to be funded at. So when I talk about fully funding the system, that's what I'm talking about, even if it's beyond the Prop 98 guarantee. Whether in the previous formula, if we're asking them to grow enrollment, we should fund that enrollment, and that rarely happened. We will have the same situation in this funding formula, which is we'll have to think about how we deficit each dollar apportioned if there's not enough funding in the system to fund everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it for me as I look at these materials, is to think about what does that even mean to fully fund our system. So with respect to the student-centered funding formula, my next question is, if we see some colleges and districts that are achieving very quickly and maybe earning more money in the formula, and then others start to rise later, would that not then, in a finite amount of money, start bringing down the funding of those who achieved early and then create, again, more of this sense of instability? And I'm not a math major, so I'm throwing that out there as, am I thinking about that correctly, that could be sort of one unintended consequence of how that might move around and create more uncertainty for colleges?
Stability.
Well, I think we're all committed. I know me coming into this role somewhat late is I've been amazed at how many commissions, foundations, oversight committees have their fingers in this. But we have all of our colleges. We need to be listening, and we need to think about that and get input on how do we address it. Also, I'm thinking, that 11%, by the way, of Prop 98 has no quantitative basis at all. I hope you all understand it. There's no quantitative basis at all to that. It's totally, anyhow, that's an issue with me. I think there's going to be a lot of, I know there's been a lot of discussion so far. We have to have a lot more discussion on how we address that very issue in the field, yes.
Okay, and then with that, and since this kind of, I think, folds under, for me, the idea of professional development for colleges and districts that might need a little bit of help, do we have, or have we had any conversations about what if the worst case scenario unfolds? You just have a pretty low performing district for whatever reasons that may be, and they keep losing money in this scenario, and that's, ultimately not going to help them improve. And I just don't know if we've talked about and I would like to believe that wouldn't happen, but if it did happen, that for various reasons the district's just unable to achieve in the formula, do we have a bottom? Is there do we take away 10% of their funding and now they're operating at 90% comparatively? I mean, I just don't know if we've thought our way through what we might do in that scenario.
Oh, no, go ahead. Can't wait to hear this answer.
That was a conversation that occurred in the legislature. And I think the way the language attempts to address that is to provide resources and support and professional development to colleges so that they can better serve their students. Obviously, this board has tools at its disposal whenever a district is facing fiscal instability, and I can certainly let the Chancellor speak to the appropriate use of those tools.
So I think it's an excellent question because it gets to the heart of the whole purpose of oversight, the whole purpose of expectations of our colleges. I think we are living that now with and have with whether it be the Compton Community College District, City College of San Francisco. We have a responsibility to ensure, for whatever reason, whether it's mismanagement, whether it's wrongdoing, whether it's just enrollment decline, whether it's natural disaster, we have tools available to the Chancellor's office to help a district get through. I wouldn't see this as any different a situation. And we certainly have experienced that in the previous funding formula where we have had particularly rural districts suffer tremendously from enrollment decline or an accreditation issue or challenges at the local level, and we've clearly there is a responsibility and accountability at the local level. So part of this has to be the community responding, but we would use every tool available to us to first help and support a district who's having fiscal challenges due to its enrollment or anything that arises from the funding formula. And second, we would, whether the use of FICMAT or any other tool that we have at our disposal, work with that district to help them recover.
I have one final question. I went to the ACBO conference, which for those, again, not to throw around acronyms, are sort of the chief business officers, their conference. I presented with my college there, and since I asked them if I could see a few panels since I was willing to sing for my supper, and they obliged. So I sat in on a panel called Assessing Equity and New Inequities of the Student-Centered Funding Formula. And the concerns that were raised in that panel included this concern that the increase in money to some districts have put pressure on their boards to compensate people better, which ironically we just had a spontaneous conversation at lunch about lack of compensation that kind of happens in our system. And so that's been a kind of a pressure that I wanted to share. But the biggest concern that was probably brought forth was this idea about sort of an inequity that gets created when, and they gave the data of some students could be funded as low as $6,000 per student and in other districts as much as $11,000 per student. They cited a 1971 case, Serrano versus Priest, which was a K through 12 case, but basically argued that you couldn't inequitably at the time, I guess, through property taxes, K through 12s were being inequitably funded. And so California had to figure out how to fix that. And again, I know community colleges are different than K through 12 and that K through 12 is required education, but sort of this argument that we might be building ourselves up to these huge differences in between the way that we are funding various schools. Their data showed the median range would be about $6,790 per student. So I'm just wondering if these conversations have been embedded in how we feel about, even in the best case scenario, some districts being funded at a significantly different rate like that than others. And I just go out to say that I saw this at a conference. I haven't verified the data or anything else, but just know that there's no way out of arguing whatever the numbers are that we're going to see a difference in per student per funding. So just curious if you have a thought on that or a comment on how we might be dealing with that.
Well, that's a situation that happened with program-based funding. There was a dramatic difference in per student funding per district. Some of that you can justify. There are high-cost areas. But that's an issue we're going to have to be discussing as we move forward here and stay focused on the performance of the students. Maybe some districts will need more funding per existing student in order to give the access to more students and to allow more students to be successful. I think the reality is it will be unequitable funding, and how much of that can the system tolerate, and I think a lot of that will depend upon the thought and the collegial, intense discussions that will take place getting to there. It won't be simple.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, because I've certainly been engaged in the conversation that you heard for the better part of the last year. I think there's a couple of things we need to be clear about that get lost in the shuffle. One is we are not talking about funding students differentially. We are talking about cleaning up inequities in funding for low-resource communities that have existed for decades. And so that's the fundamental issue here. Similar to the local control funding formula, we are intentionally trying to better resource colleges that serve large populations of under-resourced students. That is not the same as saying that we are inequitably funding students. We have inequitably funded communities for almost the entire history of California. And so there was an intentionality that the administration pursued in adopting the student-centered funding formula, in better resourcing colleges in communities that serve large populations of poor, under-resourced communities of color, low-income communities that have not had the same access to other types of resources, whether those be philanthropic resources, whether those be related to family wealth, whatever the case may be. I think that was an intentional part of the formula. Will that create, are those issues that we should consider? I think the Oversight Committee has been looking at that. We will continue to look at that. If there are ways that we could support the needs of high cost places in the state, we're certainly open to that. But there is no intentionality to discriminate, or because, I mean, the case you referred to is a case of discrimination. Right. There is no case of discrimination here. We are intentionally trying to provide more resources to communities that have been left behind for decades.
So I was just wondering, since this isn't an action item or anything, what happens after this, and also what will happen with the study that they're recommending?
So first of all, you're correct. This is because the Board of Governors continues to hear information and input and concern. We want to make sure that we had an opportunity to invite some of the leaders of constituencies in the field to come up and say where we're at with the implementation. And also give us a chance to raise the fundamental problem we have, which is what Jim raised, which is the inequity in funding for our entire system. Having said that, the Oversight Committee is independently charged to present recommendations to the Department of Finance, to the governor, to the legislature. They will do that in January as their first round of recommendations. We are going to be looking at those recommendations and ourselves working with the Department of Finance to try and implement them as quickly as possible because, as Joe Weiss pointed out, we need to provide predictability for districts. If we continue to change the metrics over time, that doesn't lead to more predictability. So we would like the governor to implement, if there are going to be changes, we'd like to see them in the January budget so that we can quickly move forward and so our colleges can understand and better predict what kind of revenue they're going to get. And we will continue to bring back updates to the Board of Governors. But at this point, student-centered funding formula is the law, so there are no changes proposed at this point.
So I just want to thank the Chancellor for reminding us the intentionality that the funding formula is really supposed to be making those changes relative to the outcomes and the success of students. And I think it's really important to have that reminder that gets pushed down to all of our colleges, because I think that sometimes that gets a bit confused or clouded. And I think it does so because what we've allowed, and I think rightly so, our colleges to do is to put in to sort of use what used to be separate pots of dollars, i.e., basic skills, equity, the student success formula. Those were all sort of their own track. And what was realized is that many of our students really legitimately are being served by all of those pots, but we really need to have equity relative to scale. But we can't forget the guiding principles of the strategic plan here, and that is two of those guiding principles. One is to really change and to narrow and then completely have our equity and our student attainment narrowed and then completely done away with within a period of 10 years. I believe that we can do that, but that means we have to stay really, really focused in on who's not being served and who should be served. And we can only do that, unfortunately, we have to do that with intentionality. And that's what the funding formula, we have to continue to look at that relative to AB 540 students, relative to the disproportionately impacted students, low-income students, those who are transferring. Those are all outcomes that should be indicators of how well we're doing, and then to be able to make some mid-course corrections as appropriate. There isn't enough money in the system, as everyone has said, but for everything, but we need to make certain that we prioritize the money where it really, really counts. And I think that on some of those outcomes that we're looking at, that's where it really, really counts. Are our students successful? Are they completing? Are they transferring? Are they getting the financial aid that they need in order to move through our system? And we need to make certain that that's happening, or we need to make course corrections. So that's a position that I feel very strongly about. But I do have another question, and I didn't hear, and this is actually going to the Chancellor. This issue around stability, and I recognize that so many things that we're doing right now, we're not as stable as we're used to being. That being able to count on and being able to look at your budget and for our districts and say, oh, okay, we should get this amount of money. We can plan on that. Maybe we'll get a little bit more and we can do something else. We're in this unstable area. But I'm hoping that some of the glitches in the first year apportionments I guess my question is, will we have those same challenges just because there isn't enough money that's going to fund this, or will districts know ahead of time, okay, I can't expect, even though we meet the requirement of being successful in some of these indicators, don't expect all of that money to come in our next apportionment, or not?
So I will begin by recalling my attitude as a former chief business officer, which is never bank on what Sacramento says you're going to get.
That part's true.
Having said that, clearly there was a lot of back and forth in this year over what the numbers are, what they actually, what we predicted them to be, and we can sort of look at a number of reasons why that happened. Vice Chancellor Osmeña did his very best to interpret the law and immediately our office posted numbers that we felt would be what the allocation would be. We had a change in administrations in between, and the current administration had a different point of view on how we should be counting, particularly transfers. We also had some issues with regard to property tax and how late some of those numbers came in. I think what we are certainly taking a look at all of that. And our goal is to improve the stability of the numbers going forward. Whether you like the numbers or not, we're going to do everything possible to stabilize the revenue numbers so that CEOs like Joe Weiss can predict and can plan. I think that is one of the primary reasons that we chose someone like Jim Austin to come in and help us with that. There can be certainly arguments about whether the formula is the right formula or the wrong formula, but what we do want is to give colleges the ability to plan. So that is our number one priority, in addition to working with the administration to make sure our colleges get every penny due to them. The 18-19 numbers, as Francis indicated, in December we will be posting what will hopefully be the final numbers. And I think most districts will find that those final numbers get pretty close to what the numbers that we thought were going to be. Unfortunately, it's taken us a little while to get there. But yes, that is one of our first priorities, is to stabilize the revenues and to give our colleges better planning tools.
Just really quickly, I want to commend you, Chancellor Oakley, for bringing Jim Austin in, because I honestly think he is a really good choice. I know we're embarrassing him, but you're going to have to deal with it. Very well respected in the community, very understanding of the principles of shared governance, and I think that you've chosen somebody who can really help us untangle this and at least bring forward reasonable arguments to the table for us to consider. So thank you for doing that.
Before we bring up members of the public, I'd like the other panel to come back for a moment. I have a question or two. So I've been to a bunch of colleges and constantly hear about the funding formula, and I get a lot of different observations, that have concerns in a variety of different ways. And the ones that have been kind of most prominent are this idea of the cost of living, and so you alluded to the fact that it's very complex and that you're working on it. The question I have is, and you may not be able to answer this, but where there's a high cost of living, does that necessarily mean that that the students who attend that college are higher income on the whole? I know there's always low-income students everywhere, but have you looked at that to see if there's any correlation there, or much of a correlation?
I'd like to say there's not much data that we haven't looked at. The issue, when we look at it in the complexity, and I can't even describe it all without charts, and I'm happy to send you a link to some of the data that we've looked at as the Oversight Committee, because I think it's kind of important. But when you think about making $50,000 a year in San Francisco versus making $50,000 a year in Modesto, I think that becomes the threshold there that says, okay, you might not qualify for financial aid. And you probably should in some respects because of the cost of living in San Francisco. My son lives in Santa Monica, and it's unbelievable, the cost of living for him. And then the next component of that we have to think about is, and I just want to use a real life example for you. I was the president at Tahoe. And while the cost of living at Tahoe is lower than San Francisco, my students had no availability of housing. So they were housing insecure. So they were paying more because there's no housing. And so it's one of the things that some of us are struggling with right now. When there's a lack of housing, then the cost goes up, and so then you look, it's a little bit different. And then you look at food insecurity. And I don't know if the Board of Governors has looked at the Sears report. If you see the complexity around, okay, what is? And then the bigger question that keeps coming up is, should the money just go directly to the student rather than the college? And that, I think we're just really we're trying to work our way through the data. I hope that answered your question to the best of my ability, but if you want to add anything.
Well, what you just raised was my other question, which was I haven't heard this idea of the money going directly to the student before. How would that work, and what options are you contemplating?
Haven't gotten that far yet. It's been a conversation that I've had with several of the CEOs at some of the colleges that are like mine. We serve students. The rents are high in San Diego. And what we look at is, wow, the average average per capita income in Chula Vista is $65,000 a year. Okay, doesn't look like low income, right? But then when you couple it with the issue, then we end up with this, like, how do we work through this? So we've been having this conversation, well, maybe it would be better if the students actually get the money to help them with their living costs rather than us as a college, because we know that student economic insecurity is really more, it's not just housing, it's food, it's transportation, it's childcare, and it differs by student. And so is it better to provide a funding mechanism through the Board of Governors waiver, it's called the California Promise now, but I grew up in that era. The other thing would be Cal Grants, or is there another allocation that we can think about that would be different? So that's the kind of engaging conversation we're having right now, several of us around.
And if I could add, that is one of the primary drivers for Senate Bill 291. Recognizing that students in the California community colleges are not adequately funded. So we want to continue to have everyone focus on one of the major pieces of legislation that is there now, that is in the legislature now, that would go directly to students. The second thing I would raise is particularly, I just spent a little time in the Bay Area, so looking at all the colleges in the Bay Area, the average percentage of students that are receiving Pell who are eligible for Pell is around 72, 73%. So we need to do a better job of getting the resources that are already available to students in their hands. So it is a complex issue, one that I don't think, at least right now, I don't think we can solve with a funding formula, but we need to solve from many points of action, and SB 291 is sitting there right now. We should all rally around and make sure that the legislature provides adequate access to Cal Grant for our students.
And if I could add to that, students have been really supportive of financial aid reform in reflecting the true cost of college. We've been advocating for SB 291 since its introduction. I testified in support of the bill in the Higher Education Committee in the Senate. And students are really pushing for addressing the true cost of college through financial aid reform. And I just like to reiterate that here as a student perspective.
I just have one more thing. I'll let you guys talk. So on the giving the money to the students, would you be recommending that the legislature change the law regarding the student-centered funding formula to send a certain amount of it directly to students instead of to the colleges? Is that what you're contemplating?
The committee hasn't contemplated that yet. It's the conversation that's bubbling around this. The recommendation that we put forward to you earlier was because it's such a complex issue, and we're having these conversations that are making us recognize that if we make a recommendation, we want it to be right. So at this point, we haven't entertained a motion or a recommendation that says, let's move it toward the students. Our last recommendation was the one we gave you today, which is not to make any other changes to the supplemental formula above what we've already recommended around first-generation students.
And as a committee, we would either recommend yes, include cost of living in the supplemental allocation, or no, don't include, or we need to study it more. I don't know about the broad scope of our charge and if we would be pertinent to include something like outside financial aid recommendations.
From my perspective, I'm not on that task force, thankfully. But it's a both and kind of a question. I don't think it's shifting money from one pot to the other. I think we're saying we're both underfunded as systems and organizations, and our students aren't fairly treated in being funded for the grants and through the state compared to other higher education systems.
Member Fitzgerald.
So first of all, I just want to thank the three of you for coming to present, and especially Valerie. I know that being a student and doing this work takes a huge toll, and it's not something that every student can do. So I really am grateful for your work, and I want to reiterate what Valerie said and what Chancellor Oakley said. That the true cost of college is obviously, with Senate Bill 291, something that every student where I'm from, Stockton, in the Central Valley, knows is completely crucial and way more than most people are aware of. And so basic needs reform and financial aid reform is actually the first fight I ever picked. Long before I was a member of the Board of Governors, I was standing, at the Capitol with the Fund Our Future sign. So it's incredibly important. And I'm grateful that we're starting to think about also, very interestingly, whether it would be more effective to place some of this money in the hands of students. Expecting the same results in terms of uplifting our students from those fears, because we know that if the financial stress of being a college student isn't adequately backed, then basically how can we possibly be students? Food insecurity, housing insecurity is extremely widespread, and especially in the Inland Empire and the Central Valley. So again, I just want to commend you guys for your work. Thank you so much, and Valerie, thank you especially.
Member Zaragoza.
I just wanted to say, I understand what the, hard conversation is around all of this. But it really does seem that, with a cost of adjustment for living, if it's not going towards students directly, then why add it into the funding formula? And so I think that really does get to the heart of it, is that if you just add it in, then you don't know where that money is going to go, and if that's going to help students, then it really has no reason to be there. And so, if there is a way to get it to go toward the students, which is what it sounds like the study is going to be around, if you're able to conduct that and see if there's a way to vet how colleges are spending those resources, and if it's going toward, let's say, food pantries and that kind of thing, then there could be a reason for it. But I definitely I like that you want to go further into it and dive into the study and see how that's going to impact those students if it were to be added. So thank you.
Okay, we have a number of public comments.
The three speakers would be Dr. Marlon Hall, Stuart Van Horn, and Joshua Hagan.
Dr. Hall.
Yes. First of all, good afternoon to Chancellor Oakley, President Epstein, Vice President Haynes, and the rest of the Board of Governors. Few things I want to mention. All of you have seen me before. I took the long drive to Riverside from Susanville. I'm the superintendent president at Lassen Community College in the great far north, further east than Joe Wise is at Shasta. First of all, a lot of things have been mentioned, but first thing I want to say is I want to thank Chancellor Oakley for working with us to get us up to the level where we need to be so we can continue to educate our students. As far as the funding formula goes, as we continue on, the funding formula should provide additional resources for colleges, especially small and rural colleges that do not have the resources that the larger districts have. Secondly, I disagree with base funding formula in this instance. I do not want a base for Lassen Community College that is less than we can operate on. We are a $16 to $17 million operation, which seems small, but that's what we are. Also, base funding does not incorporate step increases. A lot of our contracts are different, and they change every year. And also for STRS and PERS increases. For the smaller colleges, that's a big expense every year. The base funding preserves the status quo for the more affluent districts. And the funding formula was created to change structures and not maintain the status quo. Overall, there's a need to change structures and not be funded at the expense of the small rural districts. As I stated earlier, funding is needed for rural colleges, and this is also an equity issue. Thank you for listening to me, and I'll also invite Chancellor Oakley to our board meeting in December of 2019.
Good afternoon. I'll take it away. Thank you for the opportunity to present. My name is Josh Hagan, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the Campaign for College Opportunity, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization committed to ensuring that more Californians have access to a college education and the necessary supports to succeed in their educational goals. We would like to thank the Chancellor's Office and the Board of Governors for your leadership and ask that you remain committed to oversight of 3 critical areas of the funding formula implementation efforts. First, as discussed earlier, the hold harmless provision. The purpose of hold harmless should be seen as a transition period, allowing colleges time to realign their student outreach and support services to align with the priorities of the funding formula. This transition period cannot be infinite. Continuing to extend this phase in the implementation period dilutes the intent of the funding formula, which is to create bold, student-centered change. Second, talking about the cost of living adjustment being proposed in the supplemental allocation, which is a frequent topic of conversation for those of us who have been following the Oversight Committee. As Chancellor Oakley stated earlier, the funding formula was designed to provide resources in an equitable way to districts serving higher numbers of low-income students in historically under-resourced communities. A cost of living adjustment would significantly undermine that intent. Should the metrics be changed to redefine low-income status, districts serving smaller populations of low-income students will benefit at the direct expense of districts who are serving larger populations of extremely low-income students. We recognize that there are gaps in financial aid that create challenges for success, for community college students living in areas with a high cost of living, as well for students in other regions across the state. We believe that these challenges are best addressed through broader financial aid reforms and are prepared to continue to advocate for racial equity and financial aid for all community college students. And third, talking about the idea of fully funding the success allocation. In order to ensure that student outcomes are prioritized and to drive meaningful change at the institution level, the success allocation must remain a significant component of the funding formula. Continued efforts to decrease the percentage of funding designated to the success allocation signify a desire to return to the status quo that does not prioritize student success at our community colleges. Further reducing the emphasis placed on student success or failing to adequately fund districts under the funding formula for their progress on these success metrics limits the potential that the student-centered funding formula has to fundamentally transform our community colleges to better serve all our students. Thank you.
President Epstein, VP Haynes, Governors, Chancellor Oakley. I'm Stu Van Horn, Chancellor of the West Hills Community College District, serving the west side of the Central Valley. Hope for transforming funding to incorporate regional equity was first seen in 2015 with the release of equity funds to districts serving large populations of disadvantaged students in low-income communities. It recognized that additional resources are obligatory to ensure first-generation students get to the finish line. My hope widened with the new chancellor, a bold system-wide vision for success that signaled a long overdue recognition of the need for additional resources for the state's most disadvantaged students, a competitive response by California to push us at community colleges to ramp up the state's workforce completion, and overwhelming data evidence to rethink previous funding mechanisms gave me further hope. The new funding formula was welcome news to me. Like Eloy, I saw it as an opportunity to take a step back to look at the student journey and look at the data on how we can improve that student journey. At West Hills, we had been doing the right things and thought we were going to be funded for them. We diversified our curriculum, we grew student demand, we shortened time to completion, and we reduced student debt. We did our part. The failure to fully fund the student-centered funding formula was a gut punch to us. We received 16% less than we planned, a big hit for a small shop with just $50 million in annual operating revenues. 7 months ago, we cut budgets. We implemented furloughs across all labor groups this year. We borrowed from eligible sources, and we delayed adding to our nest egg for district obligations such as PERS and STIRS. But in a continuing testimony to serve our rural communities, we did not reduce access. Our enrollment target this year was the same as last year. 800 employees sacrificed so 8,000 students did not have to. Status quo today is clouding the intended lens of equity. The hold harmless was extended. The funding formula wasn't fully funded. The implementation awfully quick. We're removed from the core intent of the funding formula, and frankly, all of us are exhausted trying to figure it all out. 2 weeks ago, a motion to recommend including a cost of living metric failed a majority vote. Had it passed, West Hills would have potentially seen a further reduction
30
between
seconds.
500,000 to 2 million. Districts with declining enrollments are concerned about their fiscal stability and seek to preserve status quo at the expense of districts like West Hills that did everything the state asked us to do. That's troubling to me as I continue to dream that one day our disadvantaged students will benefit from additional resources, not disinvestment by law. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next two speakers, Debbie Klein and John Stanskas.
Good afternoon, President Epstein, Vice President Haynes, Chancellor Oakley, and the Board of Governors. I'm Debbie Klein, the President of the Faculty Association of the California Community Colleges. FAC has participated in the Oversight Committee meetings and has offered our perspective on its work throughout. Our main concern is that the supplemental allocation is overlooking low-income students and students of color in high cost of living areas. Students from the Bay Area joined the last committee meeting to express their concerns about losing services and classes as a result of the funding formula, and it strikes me that this conversation about money going directly to the students or to the colleges is a false choice, in that the money that's going to the colleges is going to the students in the form of classes and student services. So I think that that's an important point to make, and I agree that it's a both-and situation. We urge that there be a thorough study, including an impact analysis of the funding formula on the 114 accredited colleges. We encourage that the board to ensure that no students are harmed as a result of the unintended consequences of the funding formula. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. President Epstein, Vice President Haynes, Chancellor Oakley, and members of the Board of Governors, you really need more windows. Like natural light would be really helpful in the middle of the afternoon. I I wanted to say a few things about the funding formula and the oversight of this. The first one was, I think you started to address that there seemed to be some conflation of two issues around the supplemental allocation and the needs of students. And I think that our goal as institutions is to ensure equal access to educational opportunity. And I think we know that some students need more resources from the college to be successful and to have that equal educational opportunity. Some students also need more resources, not from the college, but more resources to have access to education. And so those are two separate issues. One of them is a financial aid issue that we are addressing through proposed legislation from the Chancellor's office that has support from, I think, everyone, right? And the other one is about the funding formula and what the college needs to provide to students as the educational institution separately. We're concerned, and the Chancellor is correct, every funding formula has problems. None of them are funded to the level that allows us to serve our students well. So we make a series of maybe tough choices about how to spend a limited amount of resources for our students. I think it is interesting when we talk about from the academic senate perspective, there's these three parts to the funding formula. There's the base, which is access, just a mechanism that's based on full-time equivalent students that everybody understands that part. The supplemental allocation, I just said, from the academic senate perspective, some students require more resources from the college to have an equal access to educational opportunity. The third part is the performance piece. And that's the piece where we discussed this at Consultation Council before this was passed. The Chancellor's office brought in experts, and all of them said, this really doesn't have an impact unless it's additive. And that's the crux of the issue here, is that as long as we're operating within 10.9% of Prop 98, it's not additive money. It is a redistribution of money. And if there are ways to address moving that part outside of Prop 98, then colleges aren't worried about keeping the lights on and making their fiscal obligations. They're worried about additional resources. And that's the only way that I have seen in the literature that such a thing works.
Thank you. Before we leave this subject, Chancellor, you mentioned earlier that, or maybe it was mentioned that the 2018-19 budget was finally being finalized, and 2019-20 was pretty close, and that at least for those older years, some of this money that Dr. Van Horn talked about might be actually showing up. Can you give us a little more color on that?
Well, I would invite our much more technically expert person, Francis, to come on up and give an update about where we're at with the December posting of the revenues and what that means for the system.
So our next step is to do our recalculation, which is basically doing a final reconciliation for 18-19. We get much better estimates of our property tax and our enrollment, and so that data is being collected as we speak, and will be issued to the field in December. On December 10th, we'll be holding hopefully a webinar, and by then we'll be able to speak about the results of that. At that point in time.
Thanks, but you think that there's more money than the latest estimate indicated?
I might have to call Keith here. He's our Director of Fiscal Services, but at this point, we're hopeful that those numbers are are moving up. However, at this time, like I said, we're still working through that data and trying to get as much information we can.
Keith Nizam, Director of Fiscal Services, Chancellor's Office. So, as Francis mentioned, the property tax revenue is due from the districts and county offices in the month of November. And once we receive that information, we need to vet it and make sure that the information is closely aligned between what the districts report and what the counties report. There's a little bit of a reconciliation process that goes on there, and then also what the FTE information that we're receiving through November as well needs to be reviewed and to make sure that the information is accurate. Once we have that information, as Francis noted, then that's whenever we'll be able to do another analysis of whether or not the dollars that are appropriated or were appropriated at the 2018-19 Budget Act are adequate to fund the costs of the student-centered funding formula. So it's a matter of determining whether or not the mix of property taxes and enrollment fees that were estimated at that point in time, the 2018-19 general fund appropriation was determined is enough to. So at the P2 point in time, the estimate was $103 million. So it's just a matter of looking at that updated information, and then we'll be able to provide an estimate of whether or not those dollars are adequate.
Okay, thanks. I don't know how much comfort that gives to someone who had to lay off people in the interim, but hopefully a little bit.
Well, I do think this points out something that we in the system just take for granted, which is the fact that our revenues aren't finalized until at least a year, sometimes more than a year after a budget is adopted, 2 years sometimes after a budget is adopted. And those revenues fluctuate depending on the collection of property tax. One of the biggest challenges we had this year was estimates of the property tax. The other two systems don't have this challenge, but we do. We don't have automatic backfill for property tax shortfall like the K-12 system does. So again, we are the only system that has to budget this way. And I certainly have great empathy for the challenges this creates for our colleges. But it is part of a larger, more fundamental problem than just a student-centered funding formula.
Thanks, that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to go back one item. Item 4.2, Vision for Success Spotlight, AB 705. For those of you who are freezing in here, I've asked for the air conditioning to be made warmer, but apparently it's kind of like the funding formula. It's got to be backfilled from a remote location.
Hey, thank you. Good afternoon. Marty Alvarado, Executive Vice Chancellor, here with the Chancellor's Office. So this item provides an update on student outcomes in transfer level English and mathematics leading up to the deadline for the full implementation of Assembly Bill 705, and we understand that there have been a number of requests for updates on AB 705 from the board, and wanted to make sure that we brought information in a timely manner. So we are presenting today to you all findings, if you will, early findings from early adopters from a variety of reports that have recently been published. I'd like to introduce my panelists, or I'll ask you to introduce yourselves. I'll start to my right with Alyssa.
Good afternoon. Alyssa Nguyen, Director of Research and Evaluation for the Research and Planning Group.
Good afternoon. Jessie Ryan, Executive Vice President of the Campaign for College Opportunity.
Hi, everyone. Olga Rodriguez, a Research Fellow at the Public Policy Institute of California.
Great. And so very quickly want to just remind folks of the focus of AB 705, really focused on believing in student capacity and focusing in on the throughput and the number of students who finish the Gateway Transfer course. If you'll recall, what we had been experiencing is test placements, assessment tests that were placing students based on their ability to complete the test rather than the investment in students' previous preparation in high school and other courses. And then ultimately, this is really a student equity issue. As we looked at the data, really understanding the impact that these policies and practices had on students, on large segments of students, particularly students of color. Next, we want to remind folks of the key legislative elements that were included in AB 705, really focusing in on maximizing the probability of students to complete transfer level math and English, and then really focusing in again on high school performance as the primary placement vehicle. This is an area that most institutions have been trying to implement in terms of the early adopters. And then the other thing we wanted to emphasize is that really leaning into the research that demonstrates that high school performance is really the strongest predictor of college success in the math and English courses. So as I mentioned, thank you. As I mentioned, our presentation today will really focus on 3 separate but complementary reports that look at institutions that are early adopters of the AB 705 policies. And what we see here in this first slide is really the increase in access to transfer level courses. What the research is showing, what the findings are showing, is that by and large, we had been on an upward trend in terms of the number of students that had increased access to our transfer level math and English. As we looked at the transition, though, between fall 2017 and fall 2018, post-policy implementation, post-legislation, we really see a significant uptake in the number of students who are able to access those transfer level courses. A pretty substantial increase, nearly doubling those that attempt math and English on their first try, as their first enrollment, excuse me. And then what we want to lean into here is really, again, the highlighting of increased access. Nearly 35,000 students with increased completions in English courses in that transition. So what you see in front of you on this slide is a substantial increase of students who accessed English, took the course, enrolled in it, and then the language here is really sustained the success rate. So that bar at the top, 73%, 73, 72, 71, even though the numbers of students that have increased are substantial, the overall success rates of students completing courses, the throughput to completion of courses really stayed relatively static. Okay? And then lastly, the blue line notes the number of students who have completed. And here's where we want to really emphasize that approximately 35,000 additional students completed English on their first attempt.
Say that number again?
Yeah, 35,000. It was described to me as a football stadium. Imagine a football stadium full of students who have completed English courses on their first attempt. And structurally, these students would not have had access previously. That's the piece that we have to hold on to. 35,000 in this first year, right? So 35,000 every year of additional students who will complete. Clearly, we have some work to do. You see the orange segments of the bars where we still have structural resources that we need to put in place that our colleagues will be talking about, my fellow panelists will be talking about. But I think there's something to celebrate in terms of the work that these institutions are doing on behalf of students and the supports and resources that these students are receiving to make these numbers possible. With that, I'll hand it over to Alyssa.
Thank you. So similar to what we're finding in English, so the figure in front of us is basically two charts layered on top of one another. So on the right-hand side and the first 4 bars on the screen, we're seeing the total number of enrollments, so access, increasing from fall 2015 to fall 2018. So similar to the story told earlier on English, we're also finding that the number of successful completions, in other words, number of students who are able to even get to the transfer level math courses, has also substantially increased from fall 2015 through fall 2015 and fall 2018, albeit not as significant as English. So the change that took place was approximately 13,000 additional students completing transfer level math. And so here, the first key takeaway is that, again, access is increasing over time, with the most significant increasing happening between fall 2017 and fall 2018, when we start seeing colleges begin implementing AB 705. The second key takeaway is, although access is increasing, unlike English, math is taking a little bit more of a hit. So the success rate went from 66% to 60%, so 6% decrease from those 4 years. However, to get to hold on to what Marty indicated earlier, although success rates aren't increasing, the total number of students, that is the volume of students who are successfully completing transfer level math, has grown as a result of the changes that have taken place with the structures around placement. The third and final key takeaway from this figure are the two bars on the right-hand side. So here, what we're finding is that throughput, the interplay between access and success. And the bar that indicates F15 pre-transfer throughput in 3.5 years provides us with a window in terms of what the throughput denoting the number or percentage of students who even make it to transfer level math, was only 28% for students in fall of 2015. So no matter where a student placed in math and whatever course they took in math, only 28% of those students even made it to a transfer level math course by fall 2018. We compare that to the figure, to the bar on the far right, where we show the new enrollments in fall 2018. So assuming all things are held constant, what we find is the additional number of non-successes and the additional number of successes relative to fall 2015 that we see in fall 2018. The throughput rates for fall 2018 is 52% in one term. So the changes in throughput, the opportunities for our students to be able to take transfer level math in just one term is nearly double that of what we were seeing in students in the past, even looking 3 years. So this is placement in any of the levels that were offered in the past. Even if we just look at students who are placed one level below transfer in fall 2015, the throughput rates within 3 years is still 42%, still much lower by 10% than what we're finding in for students in fall 2018. So again, like, we've made changes and there have been positive gains in terms of student performance and throughput as a result of structural changes in placement. But based on this information, there is still work that needs to be done in terms of the structural changes needed to take place in order to help students perform at higher rates in transfer level math and English. And that is where our colleagues here will share a little bit about their research in that area.
Great, and I just want to echo what Marty and Alyssa just said. In our research, we also find that there's a very strong and positive relationship between changes in access and changes in throughput. We looked at, compared the 2015 to the 2018, and we looked by college. So if you look at a report, for example, figures 5 and figures 12, we chart that relationship between access and throughput. And one of the things, and for my portion of the presentation, I want to focus on the role of co-requisite remediation and how colleges have started to change the structure of remediation, moving away from one of prerequisite and standalone traditional forms of remediation to one that provides that remedial support while students are enrolled in the transfer level math and English course. And in this slide, you see how enrollment into co-requisite remediation has changed between 2016 through 2018. It's very clear that English is ahead in terms of being able to provide co-requisite remediation for students coming in once colleges brought in access to these courses. In English, we started with about 12 colleges, and now we're at 30. In 2018, we were at 36 colleges, serving almost 15,000 students. In math, one of the reasons why we see that increase is colleges that were at the pilot stage have scaled these reforms, and new colleges have adopted these reforms, and some of them have gone to scale in the first year. For example, Citrus College. In math, however, we see a slower rate of adoption of co-requisite support for students. As we see here, we started with about 2 colleges in 2016. We're now at 12 in 2018, serving just under 3,000 students. I guess one thing to note here is that math in 2018 is about where English was in 2016. So there is some hope that it might be slower to pick up, but there's definitely momentum. We are seeing increasing adoption. And some of the challenges that we found for adopting co-requisites in math has to do with the fact that math departments have to design co-requisite courses for different math pathways. In this case, of those 2,800 students enrolled, the majority, two-thirds were actually in statistics pathways. We're seeing slower growth in pre-calculus, college algebra, and applied calculus. Let me see. So those are, and so another challenge here has been recruiting and training math faculty to teach these co-requisite courses. So there's need for that across the system. When we looked at outcomes of students in co-requisite courses, we found that compared to their peers who started in traditional remediation, 1 year throughput compared to 1 term throughput for co-requisite students in English was the difference between those groups was about 31 percentage points. In math, that was even greater. We, amongst the colleges that enrolled at least 100 students in co-requisite math, we found the difference of about 50 percentage points. So there's definitely a lot more growth. And just to caveat, the sample in math is a lot smaller. We only look at success rates, throughput for colleges that enrolled more than 100 students. But given that they start from a lower baseline, there's just more room for growth when we see colleges implementing co-requisites in math. And another thing that we looked at was the success of co-requisite students in subsequent courses. We focused in English just because we have a larger sample size. We look at enrollment and success in the critical thinking course that follows college composition. And we find that students coming through traditional forms of remediation and students who went through co-requisite remediation do just as well. I know some of the concerns are that the curriculum may be watered down, or they may not be learning the foundational skills needed to be successful in the next coursework. And we see that's not actually what the data is showing. And actually, another thing to elevate here is that these co-requisite students are reaching this outcome in less time. So instead of spending a few terms in remediation, they're able to complete that and acquire those skills in just a term, in just a semester. And another thing I just want to mention is that the research in California and what we're doing here is consistent with what we're seeing in other states. Research from Tennessee, Georgia, Virginia, is finding similar findings. Like students are coming into co-requisites are doing better. And in California, we just need to find ways to increase that support instead of offering the standalone remediation.
Thank you, Olga. I think you'll find that many of our findings for getting there, our regional and state progress report on AB 705 mirror the findings of our other colleagues. I do just want to say, in opening it up, I think it's important to remind everyone why we're doing AB 705 as a focus of a vision for success and a true equity agenda. A few years ago, a student from the Student Senate of California Community Colleges said to me, and I thought this was a profound statement, that remedial education was where college dreams went to die. And we know that if you're looking at both the racial and economic implications of placing students into remediation, that in fact can be true. And so we are trying to upend that reality for far too many students in the state. So a few highlights of our report, Getting There, done in partnership with the California Acceleration Project, and then some recommendations moving forward. Like you heard from Executive Vice Chancellor Alvarado, there are bright spots and there are real areas of concern. Among the bright spots, we know that there has been a doubling of the number of transfer level courses offered across the state, and we think that that is incredibly significant and something that we should be proud of. Beyond that, we know that we are seeing a dramatic increase in the number of co-requisite student supports. However, as Olga shared, it is insufficient to meet demand, and we need more research to figure out how we can expand the high-impact practices that we know actually yield improved outcomes for students in this redesigned model. We also know that we are seeing more students having access to transfer level English and math, but there are real disparities in math. And so one of the things that you heard is that we are continuing to see that we have far too many remedial, so below transfer level courses offered in math, and there is disproportionate impact for students when that exists. We also know that there is, from a student perspective, a real mismatch in the math course offerings between what students need and what is actually on the books. So let me explain that a bit more. We know that we continue to push an algebra-based model that does not actually focus on the vast majority of our student majors, when in fact, if we were going to offer transfer level math in statistics and quantitative reasoning at the levels necessary to match majors and demand, we would be seeing much greater success for students across the state. We have to do more to question why that has not happened in a more expeditious manner. A few things that you can do in the Board of Governors. We think that you have an incredible opportunity, like you did with SB 1440, to really identify colleges that are failing to enroll the vast majority of students in transfer level English and math, and demand a plan for moving away from that, to ask clarifying data, not just on the number of students who have access because courses are on the book, but the number of students who are starting in transfer level math and English. We know that if you are low income and a student of color, you're much more likely to believe that when you're told, either through counseling, through advising, or through your placement in a placement exam, that you are not ready for college level, transfer level, that you will not actually take that step. And so we have to do more to upend that. Also looking at developing a strategic statewide communications plan. I will tell you, students need to continue to understand their rights. They need to be able to ask if colleges are recommending that they take remedial courses, what will that mean in terms of impacting their ability to progress and complete? And I think that that's something that each and every one of you should be asking. And how do we support our faculty? So we're making sure that they are doing everything within their power to offer a co-requisite and to challenge implicit bias so that we are offering students a maximum opportunity of ensuring their success.
Thank you. So with that, this is our overview of the early implementation findings around AB 705. Would open it up to questions from the board.
Okay, I want to thank the three panelists for their work on this on an ongoing basis and the research that you're presenting today. We appreciate it. Got some student interest.
Okay. Thank you so much, especially for all of you for the reports that came out. And, Yeah, I guess a question, I guess sort of question, would be, so at this point, schools are supposed to be in full compliance with AB 705. And so I'm wondering, at what point do we get, data back from them, not necessarily on how many students they're enrolling and that kind of thing, but on exactly how they're implementing it and like the details around that. So around when do we get that?
So we have that information. Every institution was required to submit adoption and placement plans. So how they're implementing it. Our team in Ed Services is reviewing all of that information and putting together a plan for providing feedback and support. I want to say it that way. So our highest priority is ensuring that colleges have the resources that they need to strengthen implementation of AB 705. We understand that this is going to be a journey. And so we want to make sure that the feedback that's provided is both constructive and also coupled with wraparound support for institutions.
Okay. And also for that, so is there a point when we would get to see that, or?
We can certainly bring that. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then, so I was also wondering for that, let's say you were to see, because I know we've had problems with colleges that have an excessive amount of units for a co-requisite and that kind of thing. So I guess two things around that would be, if you do see that, are you going to possibly pinpoint it as something you want to recommend to that college to do something different, or asking more questions about why that is?
Right. Inherent in the implementation is a research and validation component. So institutions that are not using the default plan, which really focuses on placing students at transfer level with a few caveats, any institution that isn't following that default plan will need to be conducting research and validating their approach for implementation. And so we will have a cycle of review for the institutions to improve, but also to understand what's playing out across our system.
Okay, and then for the second part of that, I feel like usually for those with the larger unit counts, I kind of just wonder what the support services that they're offering are. And so really just, looking into that and seeing, what support outside of just, let's say, tutoring is being done within that kind of a course, and, how that will then affect and, possible recommendations that we can put out to recommend for support services.
Please.
I just wanted to say, Board Member Zaragoza, I think we do need more research in what the best practices are for co-requisite models, because there is variance across the state. And so, yes, we're seeing a greater correlation to student success, but that's not to say that just putting in place a co-requisite model means that we're meeting the needs of our students. So I really appreciate your comments.
The other thing I would just flag also as we're going through this process is that we want to make sure that in the research and validation that we're looking at equity, because equity gaps are still persisting and as we move through preliminary implementation. And so we want to make sure that we are maintaining a focus on which strategies are actually having the impact on closing the equity gaps as well.
Thank you.
I just want to add, at PPIC, we will be doing a study focused solely on co-requisites and looking at kind of how co-requisites vary across the state. So how colleges are structuring them, linked, enhanced, ALP type model, the unit load, the type of instructor that's teaching the course. So, and we will be looking at first course enrollment and how students do in those courses. So yeah, so we'll be looking at those differences.
Carol?
Math is a very fascinating subject for many students in the California community college system. Personally, I remember in elementary school excelling at math, and then there was a dip when Common Core hit. I promise this is relevant. There's a dip when Common Core hit and shifted math, and I think that the systems of education have been trying to better tailor math to intertwine it in different curriculums. I like the point that you said about that the math has to better be adjusted to other majors, and I think that's really the beauty of guided pathways, is it's breaking these silos. And that would be an example of a silo that should be broken. But I am pretty much the reason, an example of why AB 705 should exist. When I got to the California community college system, I was not very talented at math. I took a placement exam. It underplaced me significantly. I went into remedial. Like every other college student, I dealt with the incredible stress of family issues. And my first year of college, it's about that age where real life starts hitting. And I failed the remedial class. And then this semester, I'm taking a statistics class, and it's like the easiest thing I've ever done. So it's a really incredible that finally, I like the point about the remedial education. You're right. Remedial education is where college dreams go to die. And I see that every day in Stockton, unfortunately, where we've lost so many students to remedial education. So one point I wanted to bring up, though, there is a problem I've seen with 705, and that is that it's my belief that Commitment 3 of the Vision for Success, I believe it's Commitment 3, states that we need to pair high expectations with high support. And the students I've talked to across the system are worried that there's not a shared definition of high support. So a lot of students are concerned about high unit co-requisites, for example, that are essentially just, they're worse than prereqs, and so I think that as a system, we have to make a statement about what it means to be to be a high level of support, to have a high level of support, and we need to really share that definition to ensure that, or else we're just going to lose the same students that we were losing before 705 in the same way. They're just not going to be able to handle it. So that's the one thing that I hope that you guys take back and that I've heard from students across the state. And I think if we do establish a definition of shared support or, address that problem, it'll squash some of the anti-705 concerns that I've heard across the state from different students and leaders. Thank you.
Member Hall.
Can I take you back to the chart called Volume of Successful Completions and Non-Successes? This one? Mm-hmm. And it's just, I think, a basic question for you guys as to where these numbers come from. Because the numbers, first off, I want to acknowledge the 35,000 increase that the Chancellor referred to, but still the overall numbers to me look small. If we have over 2 million students in the system, where are these numbers coming from? In fall of 2018, it shows even successful completion, 88,000 people. 88,000 from where? From what programs? What colleges?
So what's not reflected in here is that these are enrollments of students who first take transfer level in each of the terms. So what that means is that what's missing in here are enrollments of students who take any English course below transfer. So what this reflects is what number of students are enrolling in a transfer level English for the first time in fall 2015, for the first time in fall 2016. And so you're not getting in this figure, the total number of enrollments in English overall. And what's not also factored in here is that not all students take English in any given term. So there are students who haven't taken English or math, but that's not reflected in here. And this is system-wide data.
Is this from all the? Is this from
This
all
is
114?
yes, all 114 colleges. What is the number of enrollments of students who first take transfer level English in each of the terms? So that means pre-AB 705, in all of these terms, all of the colleges were offering varying levels of remediation in English. And so these numbers exclude those enrollments because we're just looking at, in any given term, how many students are directly placed and taking or taking transfer level English in each of these terms.
Okay.
Member Hall, it is, I think it is shocking to see that number, how small it is relative to the total population of
Right.
students. That is the whole reason why AB 705 passed unanimously because we have been, for different reasons, forcing students to take other courses that are not transfer level. So, in doing so, keeping thousands of students out of the opportunity to complete an associate's degree or to transfer in many cases. So we had been implementing a practice that reduced the total size of the students taking that course, which we believe was was not the best practice. Just put it that way.
And I think, real quickly, I think important to note, and I'm going to put another exclamation point next to it, is that this is first-time enrollment. So 35,000 students as a first-time enrollment in transfer level English as their first enrollment completed.
Member Perigo.
I have a couple of questions. One thing, and I appreciate that you brought in the data about how students are doing in their subsequent English classes. Can you tell me a little bit about that data? What was the sample size? Did we look at anything other than this, critical thinking English class? Are we looking at, courses throughout the college that require high levels of writing? So I'm just curious if you could unpack that data for me a little bit.
Sure. So we looked at colleges that enrolled over 100 students in co-requisite remediation and tracked them over time to see if they enrolled in the subsequent critical thinking course and how they did. And we compared them to students who started in traditional forms of remediation and tracked them to see if they enrolled in the critical thinking course and how they did. And we also compared them, just for completeness, to students who got direct access to the transfer level course without support. And let me just look up that sample size. But in our report, let's see. So the sample size for students in co-requisite remediation who enrolled amongst colleges that enrolled at least 100 students was 3,392. Students enrolled in prerequisite remediation, 5,192. And amongst those who enrolled directly in college composition without support, it was 14,242.
Okay, thank
you. And so for co-requisite students, we focused on students who began in the fall of 2017 to be able to track them over, a longer period of time, because not just to, given that some students may not enroll immediately. And I think, so we tracked them for a full year through the fall of 2018. We only did this for English, given the sample size constraints. As you saw, like in math, we still are in the low thousands. So that was our sample.
Okay, thank you. And then one thing that came to light, actually, that I didn't know about, I was actually chatting with a math faculty member at my college, and she said one thing that they're noticing an increase in is problems with students who don't have good reading skills, struggling in classes that have math, word problems and that type of thing. And I'm wondering if you've seen any data on links between sort of the elimination of reading and then struggling in those specific types of math courses. Probably fall into the SLAM chain, I would assume, the liberal arts math. I don't know if anybody's broken that out to see if there's any correlation between those issues. Don't know. Okay. And then the other thing that I wanted to ask you about was a presentation that happened at ASCCC plenary, which sort of used a lot of the data that you've presented today, but then also disaggregated the data by ethnicity. And it was a bit concerning. There seems to be some pretty big equity gaps that are creeping up in this data. So even though there's more access and we do see more success, there's also an increase in the equity gaps. And I'm just wondering if you're aware of this data, or if we kind of where we're at on monitoring this, because at the end of the day, if it's not helping the people that we are purporting to help, then we're not helping students, right?
I'll jump in first here. I think a couple of things, and I think this relates even back to the reading question. I think we have to decouple that we are helping students, in particular students of color. The 35,000 increase is a significant support and impact for students, particularly students of color. I agree, or we all agree, I would say, that we have to keep an eye on the equity issue. And so this also goes back to the comments that you've heard and the data you've seen around the co-requisite support and the wraparound structures. And I think in particular, really thinking about and working with our stakeholder groups like Academic Senate around what supports faculty need to really think about what are the right structures for co-requisites, particularly with a lens through equity, right? I think that's going to be core to it. And how it was coupling in my mind with the reading component is also the question for campuses where they're seeing these types of challenges. How does that inform the design of co-requisites? So is the co-requisite more math support, or is the co-requisite some additional supplemental reading support, right? Or what reading and comprehension support? So I think really wanting colleges to think about what are those core challenges that students are facing, understanding that the best option that the research is showing right now is to place them in the transfer level course and then couple those supplemental supports around them. And in particular, I think we have to keep an eye on the equity issue, and we have to keep an eye on what's happening in the classroom around the teaching and learning component through that equity lens. I appreciate you raising that question because I think it's fundamental.
Yeah, and I would like to say this, and I hope that I can say this in a way that isn't in any way minimizing of anybody who's presenting today. But I would have loved to also have like ASCCC with, their piece of the puzzle on this to also help us better understand sort of what they're hearing in everyday operations and sort of where we can think about if there are interventions or ways that we can help colleges do their work better, that we understand, some of this data and what we're hearing on the ground, so to speak, so that we can instead of kind of broad brush painting things, like maybe laser focus where we might need more support. So
absolutely. I do want to highlight we would love to come back and continue to have the conversation around AB 705, in particular with our ASCCC colleagues. With the constraints of time, we really focus on highlighting the reports.
I totally understand.
But
that.
agreed.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to add that figure 16 in our report breaks down by race ethnicity amongst those that started in prerequisite versus co-requisite remediation. And we do see gains, doubling for Latino students in terms of throughput, successfully completing the transfer course, and like more than double for African American students. So like you said, the gaps persist. But at colleges like Cuyamaca College, we've actually seen that gap close, and some pedagogical strategies that have helped there is just more student-centered teaching and learning environments, attention to the actual the data. So looking at data specific to your classroom and better understanding maybe there are biases in the assignments, in the way you're grading students, and tardy policies and stuff like that. So and addressing those issues with by addressing students' affective domain, and so there's definitely some cases where we're seeing those gaps narrow and sometimes reverse. So there's a lot we can learn from them.
Member I think we need to move on. Member Rawlings?
So this is a little tangential, not terribly. When we're talking about the supports for students, the direct instructional support is of course critical, but I think we also want to pay a little more attention to those that are non-direct instructional. An example is one of the things we found is just simply access to resources. And the reason I bring this up is at my own college, we'd ask our students, what would be one of the most impactful things we can do for you to help improve your outcomes? And they said, open the library Sunday night. Mm-hmm. And we found that place is as busy Sunday night as it is any other time during the week. And what it makes available for them is allows them to have study groups, have study sessions in the study rooms. It allows for supplemental instruction to occur also, right? So it's things like that. So it depends on your student population. The direct instructional supports are huge, but those non-direct instructional are also important.
I believe we have some public comment. Oh, I'm sorry, Member Bell.
As we've opened the pipeline to allow more students to access this kind of instruction, how have our partner institutions in transfer responded. And because then theoretically, I hope that they're encouraging to see that they'll have more students coming through as well that might not have might have faced barriers than before, or have the faculties said, oh, what does this mean about diluting the quality of the instruction in these courses?
Well, let me work backwards. First of all, I really cringe at the thought that any faculty of any one of our systems would conclude that faculty are diluting or somehow eroding academic quality because more students of color are completing. I think we have to be very careful not to allow ourselves to even begin to think that. But
that's not what I was trying to
I
imply.
I know. But I think this why I mention is because this question comes up about. We're talking about the possibility that there could be an erosion of academic quality. And I think that we're even proposing that it's a possibility, I think gets us away from the whole point. But the CSU has initiated similar reforms in their system around remediation, and we continue to work together with them. The UC is certainly taking a look at a number of different changes, particularly to math. In terms of transfer, we continue to push for increased transfer capacity in both systems. UC had its largest transfer cohort this last year, so we think that's good news. And as a system, they have committed to going to a 2-to-1 ratio. For every 2 freshmen admits, they'll admit 1 transfer student. So that's all good news. However, recognizing that if our colleges continue to do the job they do, we are going to hit a capacity constraint. So we have been negotiating memorandums of understanding to accept the associate's degree for transfer at our AICCU partners, WGU. We're working with ASU, others who take our transfer students so that we can continue to build capacity across all of our transfer partners.
And if I could just add, I really want to acknowledge the work that our academic senate is doing to push the faculty senate at both institutions, partner institutions, to strengthen the transfer agreements and efforts across our systems.
Yeah, my expectation was that this would be a welcome opportunity to continue to increase access for students that had faced barriers that were beyond their control before. And we'd put in these, on the local level and others, put in institutional barriers that lost generations of students to the ability to complete their objectives.
Member Zaragoza.
So one last question for me. The student rights part of this is really important, especially as the campaign highlights in that report. And I guess I'm just wondering how we can do better in spreading the student right part of this. But it's really difficult at a lot of colleges to appeal. And there are so many situations, such as if you think of student parents who a lot of these classes are offered during the daytime, or they can't take that huge amount of units if you're adding in the co-requisite, and all kinds of different reasons as to why students would not want to take the co-requisite, even just not needing it. And so what can we do as a board to try to enhance those services and making sure that students understand that it's their right to be able to say no to a co-requisite?
I think that perhaps Executive Vice Chancellor Alvarado will talk about the partnership with Students Making a Change, but the Campaign for College Opportunity has partnered with Students Making a Change that has developed some really wonderful student-centered templates so that we can help empower students across the state with information on their rights. But I would tell you, until we actually have students who are, point individuals at each campus that can help navigate some of these challenges so that they are really communicating in a campus-specific way some of the supports that students can access, I think that we're going to have to rely on templates and models that exist from the state level that hope to partner with students, recognizing that students have so much on their plate, and it can be difficult to also advocate for the necessary supports at a campus on AB 705 reform.
Okay, let's take public comment now. Oh, sorry, Member Haynes.
I know.
Vice President Haynes.
What did you call me? That's perfectly okay. Okay, so just because this issue is so near to and dear to me, I just want to do a couple of things. One, to ask at some point, not today, colleges were given an opportunity not to use the default. We have 115 colleges, 114 are out there, and I'd like to have the number. That would be helpful. As some of you know, I have 4 colleges. 3 of them are doing something else, and they're not all doing something else the same way. And then I have one who's doing the default, and that one actually has data that they are eliminating the achievement gap just in some of the things that they've placed, and they were a late implementer. So I'd like to know that piece. The other is to define what that, and you've mentioned it, but I want to put that high level of support, what that looks like. As you sort of do your research, which are the models that are out there, the strategies that are out there, and to what extent are they successful? What's the secret sauce to that success? And then I guess finally, the issue again, the issue around students knowing their rights is really, really, really critical. And that 35,000 doesn't sound like a lot, but I can just tell you, at one of our colleges, the old way allowed 2% of the African American students, they passed the assessment test and therefore got into transfer level math and English. When the default was used, that rose to 35%. And for some, that might not sound a lot because we have a long way to go, but that's 33% increase on one campus, and that impacts a whole lot of students. So we need some time to really look at our success. For me, I have to continue to say we've got to be patient about that. But I am an impatient person about this, and should be, because our students they benefit from these kinds of reforms, and we are seeing it in the initial numbers.
And I would just say about a third of our institutions are implementing the default plan.
Okay, thanks. Now we're ready for public comment. We have our dynamic duo, I think, are coming back.
You know who you are. Okay, John, stand up. John Stanskus and Debbie Klein. Okay.
We do represent different organizations.
Yeah.
You can still you can still be a dynamic duo.
Thank you. Do you want to go first?
Oh, no, you were called to, but please.
Great. So I actually have a lot to say, and I was going to address some of this at the end under public forum as a report from the Senate. But since I only had 3 things to talk about there, and the first one was guided pathways implementation, and this is what I was going to talk about, it seems more relevant here, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm still John Stanskus.
If you promise not to do public forum, then.
No, I'll only talk about 2 other things in public forum. So I'm still John Stanskus. I'm still the president of the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges. I ate lunch and did not find a tie while I was there. And I wanted to say a few things that you might not want to hear, but that's my job. So some of it is often what we're hearing across the state is the discussion of 705 as a political agenda that continues that's not helpful, because it's not. It's a law. It's part of the education code. It's part of the larger structure of guided pathways. It's part of the structure of onboarding students and implementing successful programs for our students to reach their goals. And I have been doing my part, I think, to try to shift the conversation to that. because I think that's a place where when I meet with groups of people, mostly faculty, but often lots of people, and I say, our goal, according to the law, is to reimagine placement, changing from a structure of requiring students to demonstrate that what they know through skill to a place where we imagine where students can be successful, and that we evaluate the efficacy of our programs by looking at how many students actually achieve their goal, that nobody argues with me. And that's what 705 says. That's what it is. And so being able to have a conversation about that, which is the basis of guided pathways and onboarding, is extremely helpful in getting buy-in and getting people to have a reasonable conversation about how we serve students, which is all what I think we're all about. That's what we all want to do. I will say that there are some things that maybe some people don't want to hear, and that is, I think the quote that Executive Vice Chancellor Laura Hope and I wrote in that memo 2 years ago was that a majority of students should be expected to place in transfer level. Not all. A majority of students we expect to be placed in transfer level. And I think that sometimes we forget that. Right now, we've been doing some workshops with the Chancellor's Office and the RP Group and 3CSN to go around the state to talk to colleges about how their implementation has been going in the fall. We don't have much data to look at that is implementing the default placement rules. We have data from the past about lots of different ways colleges were doing things that were not the default placement rules, and we are inferring what should happen there. So 2/3 of the colleges are implementing the default placement rules, and every single one of them that we talked to said they were very concerned about compliance, and they wanted to make sure they were compliant. They knew there was a law, and they wanted to be compliant. And the way I start conversations with them is, if you're not compliant, someone at the Chancellor's Office will tell you. So let's assume you are, and move on from there. At the end of this semester, you will have data. You will know how your students did. And we are happy to, and the Chancellor's Office is happy to, and we're happy to do it together, to sit down with you and say, what does your data say? Because I bet there's something in there to be celebrating. The number of students who complete a transfer level necessarily has to be larger because you're placing many more students there. That is something to celebrate, and that is a positive impact that we're having. What are the things that we still need to work on? What things do we need to do better? What students aren't succeeding, and how could we help them succeed? That's our job, to look at that and figure out how to help them succeed. Do we have a list of here's the effective practices that will work at every college? No. Can we start amassing lists of effective practices and ensuring that we have forums in which to share those effective practices? Absolutely. I think that's what we're trying to do now. I'm looking over there, they're all looking down. But I think we're trying to find those things. Looking at the co-requisites is really important as well. How many units is that, and how effective was that? Or could we be equally effective by keeping the library open longer? And figuring out that. Is the population that's served... Is the population that's served by one college in a wealthy suburb that is much smaller than the other colleges in the district, whose average age is 19, and most of their students came right from high school, going to be able to implement the same thing as the college 70 miles away, where the average age is 30, and a third of their students never finished high school? Probably not. That's why we have local colleges to figure that out. And I think it's our job to ensure, all of us in this room, to make sure that those colleges have the resources to figure it out. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I remain Debbie Klein, president of FAC, and John just left, so now I'm the dynamic Uno. So I'm sorry about that. So I actually don't have all that much to say, but I did want to acknowledge that FAC's latest journal called Facts just came out, and I believe you all received copies. And I'm looking at Alexis, or board member Alexis Aragosa, and wanted to thank you for your article in that edition of our journal. It's been getting lots of critical acclaim, lots of appreciation. And I also wanted to let you all know that the journal features a nuanced discussion about AB 705 from the perspectives of a variety of practitioners, so faculty practitioners, as well as a variety of disciplines. And we would love to invite the Board of Governors, the RP group, the PPIC, the campaign to engage with the range of faculty groups in this ongoing and critical discussion. And I appreciate what John just said, and I know he's just beginning to kind of fill in some of the gaps that were left by a presentation that's pretty numbers and data heavy. What we feel is missing as practitioners in the field who work with our students every single day is what we're actually grappling with in our classrooms with these changes. But like John, all of the faculty see this as an opportunity to provide better support for our students to make it through to reach their educational goals without being unnecessarily stopped in their tracks. So thank you, and that's all.
Thank you, and thank both of you. I just want to close this by saying that I was a newly appointed board member who didn't know very much. When I first met Eloy Oakley, it was at a dinner sponsored by then Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, and it was about community colleges, and I voiced the fact that 70 or whatever it was, 75% of students, needed to take remedial courses, and Mr. Oakley, who at the time was at Long Beach, immediately dressed me down in front of the governor, the lieutenant governor, saying, "You don't know what you're talking about. They can all do better. It's the system that's wrong." It's just before AB 705, and so that was how I met our chancellor. And but he was right. I'm really happy that 705 was enacted. I think with the progress we've heard about today is great. I think what the faculty representatives just said is also really important, that there's a lot of nuance to this, and a lot of colleges are all different. And so I also served with Pam on the AB 705 implementation committee. So I think it's looking. I think as much as we could, it's doing as well as we could have hoped for in just 1 year of implementation. It's going to take a long time for it to be fully implemented, but I think we should all be proud of the fact that we are moving in the right direction. I've learned a lot since my first encounter with the chancellor. So we want to move on to 4.6, participatory governance and statewide engagement. Deputy Chancellor Gonzalez, this was put off from the last meeting.
Yes, if you're having deja vu and this item looks familiar, it's because you saw it at your last board meeting. We have about an hour and a half, and you have 2 more items, and I know that there are over 7 public comment cards in the general public comment section. So I am entering this with that in mind. So this is an informational item that was requested by the board president and vice president of the board back in 2018. There were 2 specific requests. The first was for our office to be completely transparent about all statewide participatory governance, committees, task forces, advisories, and I'll reference all of them as working groups from here on out because that's what I think they should be. And it's also a mouthful to say 3 different things. The second direction was for our office to begin to consolidate and conclude committees, work groups, task forces that are duplicative or that would operate in silos. And we've begun some of that work. I will only mention 4 things and then we'll open it up for questions. The first thing is that excluding the 18-member Consultation Council, which has a unique role outlined in Title V, our office engages 716 statewide representatives across all 36 working groups. That is approximately 5.2 stakeholders for every Chancellor's office employee. The second thing is that since the request in August of 2018, our office has made significant progress to align and consolidate the work of 11 working groups. This has allowed our office to host integrated conversations and model holistic discussions for our students. It has not been easy, as you can imagine, concluding the work of committees and having honest conversations on how different groups should be connecting and communicating with others. So 11 of those have been consolidated. Of the 36 existing statewide participatory governance bodies, only 4 of them are required by state legislation or Title V. And as you heard, there will be a 5th one that Vice Chancellor Mattoon mentioned today in the near future. But this is what we call Category A on page 180. So there's not much that you can do with those because those are outlined other than to change state law or Title V. And then lastly, as you know, as we move forward with presenting this item and consolidating all of the information to have this discussion with you, we learned a lot about the progress that we need to make as an agency. And those things I outline on page 186 for you to consider. The first thing that our office needs to do is to have a conversation about clearly adopting a defined chapter for each of these working groups. Alongside that, a conversation about having annual goals for each working group as it aligns to the vision for success. And then lastly, conducting and identifying clear memberships for each of these advisories. Many of these are longstanding, and I know that there are conversations about who are we missing in that room. I think these are important conversations for our office to lead, especially as we ask our colleges and districts to move forward with guided pathways. I think our office can model that at the statewide level. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Member Perigo.
I just have a quick question. Do we have operational definitions for like what is a task force? What is a work group? Has that ever been done?
No.
Yeah, that's kind of a challenge in and of itself. And then do we have some kind of org chart where we know what are subcommittees under whom and who should be reporting to who, or is it just these are all independently working groups?
Historically, they've operated, and this is in the descriptions that we've included in each of these pages. It tells you what division operates which has been a part of the sort of scavenger hunt of identifying where these live, which staff member has been leading, what have they accomplished in the last few years. We don't have a chart that shows us that. What you have are the descriptions of what they are.
Okay, thank you. I've done this on the college, and we're on year 3 of trying to untangle ours, so I can appreciate how much work goes into this, and do know that when you can untangle it to the point where you know who's reporting to who, and then how that report works its way up to your various bodies or to this body, it makes life much easier. So I wish you the best of luck as you continue to untangle it.
In our system, everything that really comes out of this, if it's going to impact budgetary, legislative, regulatory, it always ends up in the Consultation Council, right? But I think you're referencing in general all of the, yeah.
Member Perry.
I apologize, Deputy Chancellor, if you cover this, I had to step out to take a call. But I just had a question. It appears to me on a first read, I don't see the redundancy in the Foster and Kinship Care Education Regional Coordinator, and then the Foster and the other 13 and 20. I won't read the entire names of the committees. It seemed to me that they were each serving a slightly different constituency, but you are also more fully versed in those.
Yeah, so no, though this list that you see on page 182 and 183, which is where you identified those two, I wasn't saying that they were duplicative or in silos. If you do notice, though, we did consolidate the Foster and Kinship Care Educational Regional Coordinators on page 177. Right. That was duplicative work. So the ones that are the 11 that were listed, those were the ones that have concluded their work. Everything else exists today. And you have the membership list in the attachments.
Thank you. I knew I missed something, having left the room.
No. And at this point,
like Hamilton told us not to.
At this point, we don't have a recommendation about how our office would consolidate this work. This is really more informational for the board.
Member Fitzgerald.
Thank you. So just glancing through the members of the committees, I noticed that there's not a lot of student representation. I think I've only seen 1 or 2 students in the 36 committees that are participating. Can you speak to the participation of students in the Chancellor's Office's committees?
I think you'll see that some of the new ones that have been created in the last 2 years have been a lot more intentional about adding students into that work. Some of the longer standing or the ones that we would see under category C, which are committees that are not actually led by this office, but in partnership with an external stakeholder group. Those are ones where the membership is up to that partner. I think we can do a lot to improve category B, which are the ones that are created and operated by our office. And then the ones that are in category A, some are very prescriptive of who are the members of these working groups or advisories. But in general, I think that our office needs to do more, which is why I highlighted that on page 186 on the work that our office needs to do.
Thank you, and I completely agree. You know, when I was in the Student Senate, they would talk about some of the committee opportunities, but in my opinion, it's not enough just to reach out to the Student Senate. We have to be reaching at the ground level, locally, at institutions, and getting students who are really in the thick of things. The students in the Student Senate are leaders, but if we want the real critical nitty-gritty feedback that is so necessary to implementing our vision for success, we have to reach all colleges at all levels.
Yes, member.
Yeah, just wondering, I think the recommendations for us to consider seem appropriate and seem like good ideas, but I'm also wondering what staff level time it will take to actually implement these recommendations, understanding that you mentioned that, you know, there's like 5 individuals per staff member that you all are working with and juggling and have to engage with and manage. So I don't know if you all have thought about that as you came up with these recommendations and what's manageable timelines, things like that.
So we've had since August of 2018 since the request was made, and I know that my staff in different groups has been mentioning that this is coming. I know certainly I've done that in all of the ones that I lead, saying this is an expectation that the board may have of all of us. I do think that there will be some significant training, possibly a memo to our staff, some training on how to have that conversation, because it could be a very contentious conversation saying, hey, we need to reevaluate who we should be speaking with, whether there are duplicative goals that we have, and maybe we consolidate certain things. But I do think that this is something that our office can and should accomplish in the next 6 months, specifically as we have made a commitment to have joint advocacy to better support our system. And so that means that every single working group and conversation that we have needs to have an aligned process.
Vice President Haynes?
So I thank you for saying what you've just said. When I looked under sort of how you've organized this, I'll just use probably the largest division, which is the Educational Services and Support Division, where there are 17 work groups, committees. And so when you highlight them the way you have, it looks like almost on every particular issue or funding, there is a work group. And so what I would like to know in all of these, because it seems rational when you look at it that way, but I don't know if it's rational in the back room, where staff and others sort of have to keep things going. So it would be helpful to know, even within these categories, whether or not there can be some collapsing. And I recognize that there are people who really have ownership with the work groups, both internal and external, and so that's a consideration as well. So but again, for purposes of informing the board, it would be helpful to have that kind of conversation with us.
I know those are certainly the conversations that our Ed Services Division has been having, especially as, we have really taken on this idea of how do we model guided pathways? And a lot of that is how do our divisions on their own collaborate and integrate with each other? So I do think that that is something that we are thinking about, but as you mentioned, it could be a bit challenging, but I don't think it's impossible.
Yeah, because the term that we use on our campus is, are we siloed or are we working in collaboration? Mm-hmm. And so the key question is, are these siloed in a way that it's not helpful? It would be more helpful to have some alignment, some collaboration around some of these issues.
I do know that some of these are just historically, as funding comes out from the legislative process, a working group is established as a part of that process. But I think what we're slowly realizing is you can have a director of X and have statewide conversations, but who should they be collaborating with? And I think that's the next step. But slowly we've been having these conversations since August of 2018.
And then finally, some of these committees and work groups have had they've been around a long time. And so it may be helpful, and I think you made mention of it, that there's some kind of annual outcome, something that drives what folks are going to be working on, so that there's some direction. I don't know what that would look like, but to have something that ends up some type of, well, we're focusing this year, we're focusing on this because this is an issue or that's an issue, might be helpful as well.
Well, when you and I first talked about this, and you showed me the packet of these committees, and it was like this thick, and I was kind of blown away, and so I suggested that we review this at the board level. I just want to read it. I mean, I totally believe in the participatory governance process, and getting input from the field is really important, but I was amazed by how many committees there were, how big they were, and encouraged you to look at ways to eliminate redundancy or size or meeting frequency or whatever it was. And so I think you've done a great job at kind of getting started. I completely agree with your recommendations that we ought to look at those considerations for all of these committees. I guess just my other high level opinion would be that some of these are really large. Some of them meet every month. Some of them have multiple members from the same college. I think we ought to look at whether or not they should. Some are going to have to be larger than others, obviously, but where there's 50, 60 members, that seems pretty excessive. And meeting every month, is that really necessary? And particularly, how many of them need to be in person versus by the phone? You can save an awful lot of staff time and energy and money by doing them on the phone rather than in person. So I would just encourage you to look at all those ways to both align them with our strategy and also to make them as effective as possible with as little staff time and money having to be expended on it. Okay. Thank you. So moving on, we have one final item, although we do have quite a few members who want to speak in the public forum, I see. Foundation President and CEO Keitha Mills to present the annual report.
Hi, good afternoon, President Epstein, Vice President Haynes, and members of the board, Chancellor Oakley. Thank you for this opportunity to present to you this afternoon on the annual results of the Foundation for California Community Colleges. I want to start by saying a few thank yous. Number one, our work just would not be possible without all of you. We are formed to support the priorities of the Board of Governors, the priorities of the Chancellor, and we really appreciate the partnership of Chancellor Oakley, of Deputy Chancellor Dr. Gonzalez and the entire leadership team at the Chancellor's office. We simply could not do our work without that partnership. I also want to say a special thank you to Member Perry, who also serves on the Board of Directors of the Foundation for California Community Colleges, as well as Member Darius Anderson. And we really appreciate your service with our organization as well. So we are the official foundation that supports the Board of Governors and the Chancellor's Office. Our work supports all 115 colleges, 72 districts, and over 2.1 million students throughout the state. Just a couple of highlights over just the last year alone. Our role is to primarily bring in outside resources to support our system. Over this last year, we provided over $59 million of resources into the system. We run very lean. Of every dollar that comes into the organization, 86 cents of every dollar goes into direct program and service delivery. If you compare that to the national average is 60 to 70%, so we're really proud of that statistic. Our resources are brought in through a number of funders, and it's very diverse. The $59 million is made up of almost 200 individual contracts with a number of funders and partners that help to support our work. As it relates to our work in philanthropy and our grant work, we have a 94% grant submission success rate. So that means 9 times out of 10, when we submit a grant to a funder, we're able to reel that in for the support of our system and our students. It's really important to us that we are here for the long term, so we every year look at our reserves. We're currently maintaining just over $6 million in operating reserves, and that's about 10% of our operating budget, and it's kind of the minimum that we feel like we need to maintain to make sure that we're here for the long haul. And we've been experiencing really significant growth, mainly since the arrival of Chancellor Oakley and the development of the vision for success, and that the system has now adopted some really bold goals that funders and partners are really interested in investing in, and it's really impacting our organization. So we've grown 100% since 2016 and expecting that to continue into the future. So the Chancellor can never leave. So our work is very broad. Everything we do is meant to support our students, our colleges, our college foundations, and the system as a whole, and then ultimately the communities that each of our colleges serve. We do a wide variety of work, everything from program incubation, development, and management, all the way to endowment management and all those circles in between. So we do a lot of different things through our organization. We run probably over 50 different unique programs and services, and we organize those programs and services under 5 main areas of impact: student success, workforce development, equity, community impact, and system support. And you'll see the resources that we brought in just last year are primarily geared towards student success and workforce development, which are 2 areas that the system has been focused on over the last couple of years. And you will see that's followed by system support, community impact, and equity that provides much more opportunity for us to continue to support the system into the future. Our funding is made possible by partnerships. Everything we do is reliant on partnerships, both here in the Chancellor's office and with the Board of Governors, but also outside of our organization. So we kind of bucket our funding into 4 main categories. First is philanthropy. The second is state and federal agency partnerships. We also receive funding from corporations, and that's both employers and our vendor partners. And then finally, educational institutions. That includes systems, colleges, and even high schools. And you can see our funding stream for last year is pretty evenly split between those 4 areas of funder groups. And so we're really diversified in how we bring the money into the system. So I'm going to highlight just one major accomplishment in each of our 5 buckets, and there's much more in some materials that I've left behind. But I want to congratulate the Chancellor in a really fantastic year of fundraising. He helped us facilitate over $12.5 million specifically supporting the Vision for Success. In our workforce development category, we facilitated over 105,000 work-based learning opportunities, and that facilitated more than $5.7 million of wages paid to our students. Through our College Buys program and systems support, we facilitated over $60 million of cost savings, and that's for faculty, staff, students, and colleges. In our equity department, just related to our foster youth programs, we raised almost $500,000 to support former foster youth in their transition to higher education. In our community impact program, we touched over 160,000 Californians with really important resources that were designed to benefit disadvantaged communities. So there is much more about our impact over the last year in our innovation and impact reports. So I think each of you guys have that on your desk. I would also like to point out our new, we're calling it our new mini brochure. It's our Who We Are brochure. So the two of these together, we hope will be really important tools that if you're out and about and you're talking to potential partners that would like to support the California community colleges, we would love an introduction. We would love for those people to know kind of how they can work with us to provide those resources to the system. So if you need more of these, please let us know. We have lots to offer. And then finally, we're in growth mode. We see tremendous potential with the Vision for Success and the momentum that we have under the partnership with Chancellor Oakley. And so we expect to continue to see these numbers and our impact grow over the years. And I would not be doing my job if I didn't end with an ask. And so you may recall that last year, our annual giving campaign was supporting technology tools for foster youth, and many of you participated in that, so thank you for that. This year, we have named Fighting Student Hunger for our annual giving campaign. And I know that you all have seen the statistics from the Hope Center that over half of our students are grappling with food insecurity issues, and our underrepresented populations are grappling, even more. So it's an important issue that I hope you guys will all join us in contributing to. And to make that easy, I believe also on your desks is this nice little pledge campaign. So please give today. We appreciate your support for this important effort, and thank you for your partnership. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Keitha. Member Aguinaldo.
You look like you forgot my name for a second there.
No, I didn't.
Happy to remind you.
I was trying to decide whether to give you or Jeff the first shot.
I just want to take a moment to acknowledge not only your guys' great work, but the Success Center. I've had the pleasure of working with Sandy and her team over the past couple months, probably more than a year now, and I've been so impressed with the caliber of work you guys bring to the table. So thank you very much for making that work possible and for helping them help us. It really makes a difference.
Absolutely. Thank you for that acknowledgement.
Sure.
Thank you for the report. As you know, I'm a big fan of the foundation, and particularly of your leadership of the foundation to have brought such a strong structure to built to serve our students and enhance our ability to serve our students. I have a question. As I look at, which is very remarkable, as you look at the annual support by source, that you have a greatly balanced sources of support, so you're not overly reliant on any one sector, and that's speaks very well to the future of the foundation. Question I have about when you break down this one about 21 million from educational institutions, in what ways do institutions drive revenue to the foundation? What are those channels?
Sure. So we have a contract with the California Department of Education to run the California After School Network, which supports after-school programs throughout the state of California. So that's one way. We also have a number of contracts with local colleges for workforce services, for apprenticeship services, for, CalFresh also contracts with local colleges and districts to provide those types of resources. So there are lots of different ways that we contract at the system level. As it relates to the California Community College system, there are a number of times where there are statewide initiatives that get allocated out to a district, and then the district may contract back with us to provide some form of centralized services as it relates to maybe communications initiatives or kind of program administration initiatives, because we are well positioned here at the statewide level.
So it's primarily contracted services.
It is.
Also, when you manage somebody's endowment, is there any fee or revenue that's to cover the expenses of doing such?
Yeah, that's a good question. So every dollar that comes into the foundation comes in through a grant or some sort of contracted kind of fee for service type arrangement. We are not a line item in anybody's budget, so we basically have to beat the pavement for every dollar that comes in every year. And so when we're working with educational institutions, that is contracted, year over year. As it relates to endowments, we have three main endowments. One is the California Community Colleges Scholarship Endowment, which is our largest endowment, and there is no fee to operate that endowment, and that was required by the funder. So we have to use our own kind of unrestricted resources to help administer that endowment. It's an important endowment that supports all 114 colleges at the moment, and supports over 4,000 students a year, and so we do that through our own resources. The other two endowments, one is a real estate education endowment fund, and the other is a nursing education endowment fund, and there are small administration fees that we do receive to administer both of those funds, and those funds result in grant agreements where we're able to issue funds out through grant agreements to support both real estate education and nursing education in our community colleges.
How the Osher Fund, is that the first one you mentioned?
Yes.
Right. So
yes.
And then how has our investment performance been over time?
Yeah, really good. We just actually had an investment committee meeting this afternoon. So the spending policy requires that we distribute 5% per year, and our investment earnings have well exceeded the 5% distribution rate. And so our principal balance on that fund continues to grow every year. So I think when we completed the fundraising campaign, we had about $67 million in principal, and we're now up to over $74 million in principal on the fund because of earnings. So we've been really proud of our partnership we partner with JP Morgan Chase is our investment advisory firm that manages the endowment. And they're also a really great partner and funder. They fund a number of our workforce initiatives as well. So they've proven to be a great partner on a number of fronts.
Yeah, I remember when that endowment was started was right at the time of the market crash.
Yes.
And so to have built it back to well over its original is great. Last question, college buys, in addition to saving the system tens of millions of dollars, how does it generate any revenue to the foundation?
It does. The College Buys program is really the bread and butter of our unrestricted revenue sources. So when we work with our vendor partners, our work is with our college partners, where our college partners will identify common goods and services that we buy across the system, and basically ask us to facilitate the development of a single statewide kind of request for proposal to get a public contract code compliant contract in place for that service. And so when we do that, we're able to kind of put into the RFP that we're bringing the system as a whole, which drives down the price. And also we're agreeing to, in exchange for agreeing to do one common contract and to help our vendors market that contract to our system as a whole, our vendors provide a rebate to the foundation to fund those costs. And so that's really how we're able to generate kind of how we're able to pay our own way and keep the lights on through those unrestricted revenue sources through
and
College
it's also
Buys.
accessible to individual students and faculty and staff as well.
That's right.
So
we have a number of products that are technology products primarily are available to faculty, staff, and students. But the primary, our primary contracts and the bulk of the funding that is spent through our contracts come from our colleges, and it's everything from furnitures to carpet to chairs to just all the common, most kind of fixed asset type requirements that our colleges have in addition to technology.
Roughly how much revenue does that generate for the foundation?
Oh, that's a good question. So the stat I have is we generated $60 million of savings. I would say revenue to the foundation is probably between $1 million and $2 million, maybe between $1 million and $1.5 million.
Thank you.
Member Perry.
I think the laudable brevity of Keith's presentation didn't enable to represent the breadth and depth of the programs that the foundation runs. It's extraordinary. I mean, I don't even know how many, but they run the gamut and they support every aspect of the community college system. And in the time that I've been on the board, I've literally seen exponential growth, and that is a tribute to Keith's leadership and her ability to profoundly deepen the partnership with the community colleges. And a large part of that credit does go to our chancellor, seeing the opportunities inherent in this partnership and really realizing them in a way that had not been realized prior to that. So, and not only has the growth been exponential, the foundation conducts itself with scrupulous integrity.